numbers in the billions. Legal sports betting is set to go live in at least 6 more states this year, as well as the District of Columbia. This is Bloomberg.
Vatsal Shah is Senior Project Engineer at Mott MacDonald, a global engineering consultancy with more than 16,000 employees. He earned his PhD at New Jersey Institute of Technology, and as an adjunct professor, is helping NJIT students explore emerging technologies.
My focus is renewable markets, emerging technologies, the idea of floating cities. What are we doing to develop that? What will happen to the city on the water? Well, you're going to have waves hitting it. You're going to have solar. How are you going to develop plants? How are you going to develop vegetation and farming? That sort of thought process happens at NJIT. We actually plan out what will the city look like. How do we develop that? So in 10 years, we're actually ready to take on those challenges when we have our first development in the water. NJIT also has been doing a lot of work in self-healing materials, so taking the polymers and the new material that we have in our material sciences departments and putting them into things like concrete, things like steel, reinforcing our soil.
NJIT, New Jersey Institute of Technology. Learn more at njit.edu.
Rich is just a really good guy. The term good egg isn't enough to describe him. He's also certified organic and free range. Rich puts the cap back on everything. The toothpaste, the olive oil, the shampoo, everything. He lets his 10-year-old nephew beat him at virtual tennis, even though he can straight up slay his 10-year-old nephew in virtual tennis. When the toilet paper is running low, Rich replaces the roll on the actual holder, not just on the back of the toilet. Rich is texting and driving. Rich? No. What are you doing, Rich? I was just telling everyone how great you are. Texting and driving makes good people look bad. Visit StopTextStopWrecks.org. A public service announcement brought to you by the National Highway Traffic Safety Administration and the Ad Council.
Asset managers who sees change to launch.
At the Bank of Santander, they've created Stan, a smart bot that can predict the future of remortgaging.
All right, Stan, will my mortgage rate go up?
1955 was the last time Newcastle won the cup.
No, try not to mumble.
Playing, let's get ready to rumble.
Meanwhile, at Santander, they can't predict your future, but they'll help secure it with great mortgage rates fixed for up to 10 years. See what's possible at Santander.
Early repayment charges apply. Lending subject to status and criteria. Your home may be repossessed if you do not keep up repayments on your mortgage.
Despite never having used them, Alison Peartree was not initially a fan of purple bricks.
Because I heard from my uncle's cousin's neighbour's dog walker they don't have proper estate agents.
But Alison's uncle's cousin's neighbour's dog walker was wrong. Purple Bricks have experienced local agents ready to sell your home.
Turns out Martin from Purple Bricks was very knowledgeable. And he didn't charge commission. I've even recommended him to my sister's boyfriend's auntie's hairdresser, Sharon.
Purple Bricks. Book your free valuation today.
Fixed fee payable on instruction or after 10 months. Viewing service cost extra.
Keys. Check. Phone. Check. 70s playlist downloaded. Check. Nice. There's one more thing you should check before you leave. Your travel. There's a new cycleway under construction between Kensington Olympia and Brentford Town Centre, so expect delays due to lane closures at the junction of Kew Bridge Road and Chiswick High Road. Plan ahead at tfl.gov.uk. To the Mayor of London and TfL, every journey matters.
Jim from Nuneaton writes, "You were everything I desired. Perfection. I only had eyes for you, but before I really knew it, you were gone, leaving just an empty box behind. I just want you back. Your 2 juicy patties, crisp lettuce, gherkins, onions, cheese, and my favorite Big Mac sauce."
You can now spend even longer with the taste you love with the Grand Big Mac, but only until the 24th of March. Served after 11 a.m., subject to availability, participating restaurants only.
Influential conversations from Bloomberg Television. Here's Taylor Riggs.
China's growing integration in global supply chains means a slowdown due to the virus outbreak could have a larger spillover than how the SARS virus did in the past. To discuss how the global economy may be impacted by the epidemic, we are joined now by Rohini Malkani, global sovereign ratings analyst at DBRS Morningstar in New York. Rohini, great to have you. Talk to me about the broader implications that you see from this coronavirus relative to what we witnessed in SARS almost 2 decades ago.
Yeah, thanks, Taylor. So, as we had kind of mentioned, given China's increasing share in the global economy, coupled with its growing integration in supply chains, clearly means that any slowdown because of the virus will likely have a larger spillover impact than in the past. Now, very quickly, as we've seen, back in 2003, the global fallout was limited. China had just joined the WTO, but since then, we've seen that the economy has kind of basically grown from 1.7 trillion to close to around basically 14 trillion today. Also, if we kind of look at it, look at the weight of the economy, it was only around 4% of global GDP. Today, it's close to around 18%.
Hear more interviews like this one on Bloomberg Television, streaming live on Bloomberg.com and on the Bloomberg mobile app, or check your local cable listings. Markets, headlines, and breaking news 24 hours a day at Bloomberg.com, the Bloomberg Business app, and on Quick Take by Bloomberg. This is a Bloomberg Business Flash.
And I'm Karen Moscow. 6:17 on Wall Street on Bloomberg. Daybreak is out on customer terminals, bringing you all the news you need to start your day. Let's get a check of the latest headlines with Hannah George at the Bloomberg Daybreak desk. Good morning, Hannah.
Good morning, Karen. President Trump will take an impeachment victory lap with an address at noon from the White House. He was acquitted as expected, but Mitt Romney sided with the Democrats, becoming the first senator ever to vote to remove a president from his own party. The coronavirus death toll has passed 560, while confirmed cases rise above 28,000. Governments, including India and Hong Kong, are now putting more restrictions in place for travelers from China. Qualcomm and Peloton reported earnings that disappointed Wall Street. Qualcomm warns revenue from 5G will take longer than expected. Guidance from Peloton fell short of estimates. And China will cut tariffs on $75 billion of US imports in half. That takes effect on Valentine's Day, when the US also plans to trim its levies on Chinese products. For the news you need to start your day, check out Daybreak on your mobile phone on the Bloomberg Anywhere app. Karen.
Right, Hannah, thank you. S&P futures up 7 points this morning. Dow futures up 81. NASDAQ futures up 25. The DAX in Germany's up 0.7%. 10-year Treasury up 3/32, yield 1.63%, and the yield on the 2-year 1.43%. NYMEX crude oil is up 0.6% or 30 cents at $51.05 a barrel. And COMEX gold is up 0.5% or $7 to $15.69.80 an ounce. The euro is at 1.10 against the dollar. British pound 1.2967. And the yen 109.85. And that's a Bloomberg Business Flash. Now here's Michael Barr with more on what's going on around the world. Michael.
Karen, Pete Buttigieg and Bernie Sanders were in a virtual tie in the Iowa caucuses as the state's Democratic Party continued to struggle with releasing long-delayed results. Buttigieg has 26.2%. Sanders has 26.1%. with 97% of precincts reporting. Meanwhile, a top state Democrat told party leaders on a conference call last night, supporters of President Trump flooded a hotline used by Iowa precinct chairs to report Democratic caucus results after the telephone number was posted online, worsening delays in the statewide tally. Flights resumed today at an Istanbul airport after a Turkish airliner skidded off a runway, killing 3 people and injuring dozens. Investigators believe weather may have contributed to the accident. In the NBA, the Nets beat the Warriors, the Celtics won. In the NHL, the Rangers won, the Bruins won in overtime. Global news, 24 hours a day, on air and on Quick Take by Bloomberg, powered by more than 2,700 journalists and analysts in more than 120 countries. I'm Michael Barr. This is Bloomberg. Nathan.
Okay, Michael, thank you. It is 6:20 on Wall Street and live from the Bloomberg Interactive Brokers Studios. This is Bloomberg Daybreak. I want to take a closer look now at the political state of play, the policy state of play. Now, after the impeachment trial, John Hudak joins us. He's Senior Fellow for Governance Studies at the Brookings Institution. Good to talk with you this morning, John. Before the president delivers these remarks from the White House at noon Wall Street time on Twitter, he said he will discuss his victory, or our country's victory, I should say, on the impeachment hoax. What are you expecting to hear from the president this afternoon?
I expect to hear from the president a pretty aggressive screed against Democrats, against the process, probably against Senator Romney, who was the only member of his party to vote against him. It's going to be likely the type of emotional speech that I think some people feared would have seeped into the State of the Union, but this will be reserved pretty much entirely for that kind of discussion.
Of course, Romney, there was no political upside for him to cast the vote he did. He made that clear on his Senate floor speech. What, if anything, changes with that vote from Romney?
I think it's a clear line in the sand for the president that while he has an extraordinary amount of control over his caucus in the Senate, it is a sign that he doesn't have total control. And on one of the most important votes a senator can cast, a vote on whether to acquit or convict a president who has been impeached, Romney was not willing to toe the party line, and he was not willing to just kowtow to the president. And I think that may give other senators a little bit more room to defy the president on other issues moving forward.
Although we saw some of those senators that we had been looking at, like Susan Collins and Lisa Murkowski, sort of hedging on why they decided to vote the way they did. Collins, in particular, said that she hopes the president changes his tactics after this impeachment process. Is there any reason to think he will?
Absolutely not. I mean, after 3 years of the Trump presidency, it's pretty clear that the president doesn't change his mind and he doesn't change his course. I have no idea what planet Senator Collins is operating on that she thinks that, or she would think that the president, having gone through this process and the Senate acquitting him, would signal to him that he needs to do something different. There are no consequences for this president's actions right now, and I don't think because of that, the president's going to do anything different.
The consequence that many Republicans and even the White House counsel had argued for was for the voters to decide in November. This does set up a race that could be focused on the president's behavior. Is that what you expect from Democrats, that this is going to be the issue now? Or can they focus on something like alternative policy proposals against the president?
It would be an extraordinary mistake for Democrats to make the November election essentially a do-over on impeachment. They need to talk about issues. They need to talk about the areas of the economy that a lot of Americans are not benefiting from, even though other segments are. They need to talk about the contrast between their ideas and the president's ideas. And if they march toward November simply saying the president should have been removed from office, he has committed acts that are beneath the presidency, that are corruptive, and you need to vote him out of office for that, the president will be reelected.
Just quickly, that's kind of a difficult task when you still have this debate within the Democratic Party on whether to go progressive or centrist, isn't it? Just quickly.
I don't think so. I think it's easy to talk about ideas if you're a Democrat, because whether you're a centrist or a progressive, you're going to differ significantly from this president's ideas.
All right, thanks for this. Good talking with you this morning. John Hudak, Senior Fellow for Governance Studies at the Brookings Institution. Get our next look at the Democratic presidential candidates tomorrow night at the New Hampshire debate. You can hear it live here on Bloomberg Radio beginning tomorrow night at 8 p.m. Wall Street time. Futures on Wall Street moving higher this morning. S&P futures up almost 8 points. Dow futures up 87. NASDAQ futures higher by 28 points. This is Bloomberg.
This is a Bloomberg Money Minute. Markets continue to power higher on China's plans to cut tariffs on U.S. imports and amid optimism that the global economy can withstand the coronavirus impact. China will cut in half the tariffs on some $75 billion of imports from the U.S. later this month, likely satisfying part of the interim trade deal. And we have the U.S. equity market at record highs after rising more than 1% yesterday. The Dow was up 483 points. Today we'll watch for a couple of job market indicators ahead of tomorrow's Labor Department report for January, and we get another round of earnings from a diverse group of companies, including World Wrestling Entertainment and Uber. Facebook has now joined YouTube, Twitter, and the payment service Venmo in demanding that the facial recognition company Clearview AI stop harvesting user images to identify the people in them. Clearview has drawn scrutiny following investigative reports by the New York Times and BuzzFeed detailing its work with law enforcement and its practices of scraping social media for images. Gina Cervetti, Bloomberg Radio.
know. Business is constantly evolving. Is your financial printer evolving to keep ahead of the curve? At Command Financial, we are redefining financial printing by providing industry-leading expertise, leveraging technology, and honing processes and best practices. Every day, Command helps SEC registrants, as well as members of their working groups, including securities attorneys and investment bankers, prepare, file, and disseminate regulatory and disclosure documents, such as registration statements, M&A documents, and mutual fund prospectuses and reports. Command provides a full range of services to help you effectively complete your deal, meet your disclosure requirements, and achieve your shareholder communications objectives. Visit our website at commandfinancial.com and learn how we're evolving, not only with the times, but also with your business requirements. Command Financial, redefining financial printing. Eluded by...
For up to 50% off selected floors and beds. For first-class fitting. For kicking your heels off. For overexcited kids. And pets. For thrills and spills. For a special welcome home. For up to an additional £250 off your total flooring order. Carpet Right for life. Terms and conditions apply.
Keys. Check. Phone. Check. 70s playlist downloaded? Check. Nice. There's one more thing you should check before you leave. Your travel. There's a new cycleway under construction between Kensington Olympia and Brentford Town Centre, so expect delays due to lane closures at the junction of Kew Bridge Road and Chiswick High Road. Plan ahead at tfl.gov.uk. To the Mayor of London and TfL, every journey matters.
As the boss, I expect only the best for my office. Air conditioning, super comfortable seating, digital radio, and rear parking sensors. From dealing with deliveries to balancing the books, my new Citroën van, my office on the move. Award-winning Citroën vans. Like you, they do it all. With £500 off during the February van event. Citroën. £500 discount inclusive of VAT on qualifying relay, dispatch and Berlingo vans ordered from 1st to 29th of February and registered by the 31st of March. Business users only. Full T's and C's at citroen.co.uk.
Wouldn't it be nice to keep things you normally lose? Your favourite scarf, your train of thought, or your mobile data? Because with most other networks, you get to the end of the month and your data is, well, never to be seen again. But unlike anyone else, with Sky Mobile, you can roll and keep all your unused data for up to 3 years. Sky Mobile. Hello, possible.
Full terms and conditions at sky.com/mobile.
Welcome to Cathay Island. We hope you've enjoyed flying Cathay Airways. Oh, and Cathay, congratulations on the Euro Millions win.
This Friday's Euro Millions is a massive £105 million super jackpot. That's dream come true money. Euro Millions from the National Lottery. Your numbers make amazing happen. Estimated jackpot. Rules and procedures apply. Players must be 16 or over.
5 is in! What a run! Touchdown, Kansas City!
Congratulations to the Kansas City Chiefs on winning their first Super Bowl in 50 years and second in franchise history.
50, Watkins, 10, chase to the 5, into the end zone, touchdown! That may be all she wrote!
While the NFL's 100th season may be over, football never stops on TuneIn. Search NFL Podcast to stay current with all the off-season wheeling and dealing. And get ready for the 2020 NFL Draft in April.
The Bloomberg Interactive Broker Studio in New York. Bloomberg 1130 to Washington, D.C. Bloomberg 99.1 to Boston. Bloomberg 106.1 to San Francisco. Bloomberg 960 to the country. Sirius XM Channel 119 and around the globe. The Bloomberg Business app and BloombergRadio.com. This is Bloomberg Daybreak.
It is 6:30 on Wall Street. Good morning. I'm Nathan Hager.
And I'm Karen Moscow. We are just about 3 hours away from the opening of U.S. trading. Let's get you up to date on the news you need to know at this hour. U.S. futures are higher this morning, following news that China is cutting tariffs on $75 billion of U.S. goods in half. The action is part of terms outlined in the Phase 1 trade agreement between the two countries. For more, we're joined live by Bloomberg's John Tucker. Good morning, John.
Yeah, good morning, Karen. The cuts are scheduled for Valentine's Day. China is honoring the terms of the interim trade deal reached with the White House. But at the same time, it's hoping for some flexibility from the United States. That's because the coronavirus has slowed Chinese economic growth. A clause in the trade agreement says a natural disaster or other unforeseeable event can allow for a delay. I'm John Tucker, Bloomberg Daybreak.
Thank you, John. Meantime, the death toll from the coronavirus is now past 560, while confirmed cases climb above 28,000. Health officials are racing to develop a treatment as the illness continues to devastate China. Let's get more now from Bloomberg Daybreak Asia anchor Brian Curtis in Hong Kong.
Today, day 14 since China locked down Hubei, marking the end of the incubation period for infection. Now, markets may be looking past all this, but everywhere in Hubei, scenes of chaos as residents cope with the world's biggest ever quarantine. The race is on for a vaccine, but the WHO says that's a long way off. In Hong Kong, Brian Curtis, Bloomberg Daybreak.
All right, Brian, thank you. Oil pairing gains after a meeting of OPEC's Joint Technical Committee. A delegate from the group says it plans to recommend cutting output by about 600,000 barrels a day to combat the outbreak's effect on demand. Checking prices now, NYMEX crude oil is up 1%. It's at $51.24 a barrel, and Brent is up 0.25% at $55.41.
In Europe, German factory orders fell at their fastest pace in more than a decade. Demand fell 2.1% in December.
On the earnings front, we get results from almost 36 companies in the S&P 500 today, among them Bristol-Myers Squibb, Cigna, and Twitter.
Shares of Peloton are down more than 8% in early trading. The exercise equipment company says sales in the current quarter will be lower than estimates.
GoPro shares are falling 11%. The digital camera company reported disappointing earnings and revenue.
And we continue to track Tesla. After an epic 6-day rally, Tesla shares tumbled 17% yesterday. This morning, the stock is down another 5.25%.
Futures this morning are higher. S&P futures up 11 points. Dow futures up 111 and NASDAQ futures up 36. The DAX in Germany's up 0.7%. 10-year Treasury up 3/32, yield 1.63%, and the yield on the 2-year 1.43%. And straight ahead, we have the latest world and national news. And this is Bloomberg.
Thanks, Karen. 6:33 on Wall Street, and this news update is brought to you by Land Rover. The Own the Adventure sales event is happening now until March 31st. Visit your tri-state area Land Rover retailer for details on the new Discovery Sport. Land Rover, above and beyond. Here's Michael Barr.
Thank you, Nathan. President Trump is expected to deliver a speech today after being acquitted in his Senate impeachment trial. The president says he'll be talking about our country's victory over the impeachment hoax. Bloomberg will carry the noon speech live. Bloomberg's Ed Baxter has more on the acquittal vote in the Senate.
The votes 52-48 and 53-47 on abuse of power and obstruction of Congress. The major drama was Mitt Romney saying on the floor before the vote that he would become the only Republican to vote guilty on the first article of abuse of power.
The grave question the Constitution tasks senators to answer is whether the president committed an act so extreme and egregious that it rises to the level of a high crime and misdemeanor. Yes, he did.
He did vote guilty on abuse, but did vote to acquit on the second article of obstruction of Congress. So this episode is ready for the history files, but Democrats are still talking about subpoenaing John Bolton and the Republicans Hunter Biden. In San Francisco, I'm Ed Baxter, Bloomberg Daybreak.
The latest round of results from the Iowa Democratic caucuses show Pete Buttigieg with 26.2% over Bernie Sanders with 26.1%. with 97% of precincts reporting. Meanwhile, Joe Biden, who came in fourth, is hoping to pull off a win in New Hampshire's primary next week. Biden, speaking at a town hall in Somersworth, took aim at one of his main rivals, Bernie Sanders.
He calls himself a democratic socialist. Well, we're already seeing what Donald Trump is going to do with that.
As for Buttigieg, Biden says it's a risk to nominate someone who has never held an office higher than mayor of a town of 100,000 people. Acting Homeland Security Secretary Chad Wolf is suspending trusted traveler and global entry programs for New York residents over a new state law allowing undocumented immigrants to obtain driver's licenses. Wolf says it's effective immediately. Bernie Madoff is asking for a compassionate release from his 150-year prison sentence due to kidney failure, saying he has less than 18 months to live. Madoff pleaded guilty to 11 federal counts in 2009 involving the largest Ponzi scheme in history. Connecticut Governor Ned Lamont proposed legalizing marijuana over overhauling the state's economic development strategy also as part of his $22.3 billion budget proposal. Global news, 24 hours a day, on air and on Quick Take by Bloomberg, powered by more than 2,700 journalists and analysts in more than 120 countries. I'm Mike LaBar. This is Bloomberg, Nathan.
Michael, thanks. Just before 6:36 on Wall Street, time for the Bloomberg NBC Sports Update. Here's John Stashauer.
Nathan, the Yankees are hopeful they won't be as decimated by injuries this year as they were a year ago. But yesterday came news that James Paxton needed back surgery to remove a cyst and may not pitch until June. Paxton won 15 games in his first season in pinstripes. The big Mookie Betts trade, not yet official. The Red Sox worked to get 21-year-old pitcher Brusdell Greatwall. He's already had Tommy John surgery and a shoulder injury, and now he may be taken out of the trade, but it's still expected to happen, and Betts is still expected to be moved from Boston to the Dodgers. NBA trade deadlines today. Miami Heat have a deal in place to get veteran Andre Iguodala from Memphis, where he had refused to play. The Heat may also acquire Danilo Gallinari from Oklahoma City. D'Angelo Russell may be on the move from Golden State. A year ago, Russell was a Nets All-Star. He was back in Brooklyn last night. He missed all 8 of his three-point shots, and the Nets crushed the Warriors 129-88. Kevin Durant was on the Nets bench watching his new team beat his old one. Rangers in Toronto at the Guard, 1-1 first period.
Kreider in for the face-off, wins it, Zibanejad. How about that? Kreider wins the face-off, and Zibanejad cases in. It's 2-1 Rangers.
MSG, 6 seconds later, Kreider scored. The Rangers went on to win 5-3. Seton Hall won at Georgetown, 78-71. Huge game from Miles Powell, 34 points. He also had 8 blocked shots as the Pirates go to 9-1 in the Big East. For the Bloomberg NBC Sports Update, I'm John Stashauer. Nathan?
Thanks, John. It's 6:37 on Wall Street.
The following commentary is from Bloomberg Opinion.
Trump has a lot of nerve to tout health care. I'm Max Neeson, a columnist for Bloomberg Opinion. President Trump looks safe from impeachment, but still needs to get reelected. He has one huge obstacle. Voters don't trust him on health care, an issue they rate as more important than anything else. The president tried to tout his health care record at Tuesday's State of the Union address, but America has seen 3 years of health care under President Trump. It's been dismal, and voters are right to doubt him. Trump began the health section of his speech with a lie, saying that we'll always protect patients with pre-existing conditions. In 2017, he nearly replaced the Affordable Care Act with policies that would have gutted safeguards for sick people. He still supports a lawsuit that could eliminate Obamacare, this time without bothering to say how he'd replace it. Trump also highlighted efforts to combat high drug prices, another area where his record is weak and his rhetoric diverges from reality. The administration has rolled out many pricing initiatives. Almost none of them were mentioned in the speech Tuesday night, because those that haven't been outright abandoned are terminally delayed. There's been little palpable change for patients, and the president's claim that drug prices have dropped under his watch rely on flawed data. Given his record, the president's best bet on healthcare may be to keep quiet. His opponents likely won't give him that opportunity. I'm Max Neeson. For more opinion, please go to Bloomberg.com/opinion or OPIN Go on the Bloomberg terminal.
This has been Bloomberg Opinion.
You can hear Bloomberg Opinion commentaries every weekday at this time, and terminal customers can read more at OPIN Go. It's almost 6:39 on Wall Street. Time for the Bloomberg Green Report. Here's Bob Moon.
It's pretty near impossible to describe in words the exploding waves that often pound the Pacific coast. So tourists, nature lovers, and amateur scientists are whipping out their cameras to document the effects of extreme high tides on shorelines. These so-called king tides occur about twice a year when the sun and moon align to enhance the gravitational pull that produces normal daily tides. Volunteers around the globe upload images, many with geolocation data embedded, to be used by scientists, policymakers, and even city planners as they study and prepare for the effects of climate change. The photos show where flooding occurs on specific roads, or give clues about whether it's safe to build new housing, for example, near an eroding bluff. The idea of using citizen scientists to collect the images has spread to more than a dozen coastal states in the U.S., to New Zealand, and beyond. That's the Bloomberg Green Business Report. I'm Bob Moon.
All right, thank you, Bob. Some other stories we're following this morning. HSBC is rolling out its third overhaul in a decade. Chairman Mark Tucker is looking at job cuts, unit mergers, disposals, and closures. Investors are getting frustrated. 2 post-crisis resets and Tucker's first pick as CEO all flopped. Societe Generale has pledged to boost shareholder returns. It's also shifting to a new cash dividend policy. That's after the French bank warned investors not to expect much in the way of revenue growth. Toyota is raising its forecast for the full year. That and quarterly profit that beat estimates helped shares of the car maker gain more than 2.5% yesterday in Tokyo. S&P futures gaining 11.5 points right now. Dow futures up 120. NASDAQ futures higher by 38 points.
Hey y'all, Jeff Foxworthy here. Now, if you've ever found yourself repeating the same thing over and over for 75 years, you might be Smokey Bear.
Only you can prevent wildfires.
That's why I'm filling in for Smokey to switch things up, because there's a lot more to say. And I should know because my grandfather was a firefighter. And one of the things he taught me is that the people that love the outdoors the most are often the ones accidentally starting wildfires, which means always BYOB. No, bring your own bucket to the campfire. And be extra careful with things like burning yard trimmings. Don't just walk away, or chances are you might be starting a wildfire. So for the love of the outdoors, go to SmokeyBear.com to learn more about wildfire prevention. Brought to you by the U.S. Forest Service, your state forester, and the Ad Council.
Why has J.D. Power ranked Commonwealth Financial Network #1 in independent advisor satisfaction among financial investment firms for the 6th straight time? We think it comes down to one thing: you. Because it's your input and feedback that keeps us focused on what's most important to you and your clients and continually pushes us to be the best we can be. Maybe that's why we receive top marks in every category of the J.D. Power 2019 Advisor Satisfaction Survey. They named us #1 in client support, #1 in firm leadership, #1 in operational support, #1 in compensation, #1 in professional development support, and #1 in technology support. Ready to partner with the best? Call Commonwealth at 866-462-3638 or visit commonwealth.com and feel the power. Member FINRA a registered investment advisor. For 2019 J.D. Power Award information, visit jdpower.com/awards.
This is a Bloomberg Pursuits look at luxury.
Whatever job you're searching for, you can find it on LinkedIn. First jobs, flexible jobs, keep me out the cold jobs, advertising jobs, accounting jobs, HR, PR, even ER jobs, East London jobs, West London jobs, extra hour in bed jobs, startup jobs, late start jobs, get home in the daylight jobs, banking jobs, building jobs, flexible working on a Friday jobs, or even voiceover jobs, which is how I ended up recording this ad. Search millions of jobs on LinkedIn and find one meant for you.
Keys. Check. Phone. Check. 70s playlist downloaded? Check. Nice. There's one more thing you should check before you leave. Your travel. There's a new cycleway under construction between Kensington Olympia and Brentford Town Centre, so expect delays due to lane closures at the junction of Kew Bridge Road and Chiswick High Road. Plan ahead at tfl.gov.uk. To the Mayor of London and TfL, every journey matters.
Wouldn't it be nice to keep things you normally lose? Your favourite scarf, your train of thought, or your mobile data. Because with most other networks, you get to the end of the month and your data is, well, never to be seen again. But unlike anyone else, with Sky Mobile, you can roll and keep all your unused data for up to 3 years. Sky Mobile. Hello, possible.
Full terms and conditions at sky.com/mobile.
5 is in! What a run! Touchdown, Kansas City!
Congratulations to the Kansas City Chiefs on winning their first Super Bowl in 50 years and second in franchise history.
50, Watkins, 10, chase to the 5, into the end zone, touchdown! That may be all she wrote!
While the NFL's 100th season may be over, football never stops on TuneIn. Search NFL Podcast to stay current with all the off-season wheeling and dealing. And get ready for the 2020 NFL Draft in April. Hey, NFL fan, can't watch the game? Can't be there? No biggie. With your TuneIn Premium membership, you already have an all-access pass to every team and every game in the league. Amazing, right?
Steps up, floats it towards at the goal line. It's intercepted.
Listen live as the action unfolds, or on demand when you can. Anytime, anywhere, all season long.
Right side, it is caught. It is in for the right side for the touchdown.
Search NFL today.
News and financial information 24 hours a day. Powered by more than 2,700 journalists and analysts in more than 120 countries. This is Bloomberg Radio. Now, a global news update.
President Trump is planning to speak publicly about the end of the impeachment trial today at noon Eastern Time. In the meantime, correspondent Phil Mattingly tells us the mood on Capitol Hill is somber.
The big question, what comes next? And I can tell you, talking to Republicans and Democrats here on Capitol Hill, there is real concern about what comes next. This institution, as one senator told me, is not in a good place. So everybody's going to have to figure it out. But one thing they know for sure, President Trump is still in the White House and will be at least through January of 2021.
New results from the Iowa Democratic caucuses on Monday show Pete Buttigieg and Bernie Sanders nearly tied with almost all the votes counted. China has cut tariffs on $75 billion of U.S. imports, including soybeans, pork, and auto parts, in a trade truce with Washington as Beijing struggles with the costly virus outbreak. The cuts follow last month's signing of a Phase 1 deal with the U.S. toward ending a long-running tariff war. U.S. stock futures are following global stock markets higher this morning. I'm Michael Toscano.
Tom Keene and Jonathan Farrell.
Is that good for American finance?
What is happening with the headcount?
Right, where it counts. Bloomberg Surveillance, weekday mornings at 7 Eastern on Bloomberg Radio. Bloomberg, the world is listening. Markets, headlines, and breaking news 24 hours a day at Bloomberg.com, the Bloomberg Business app, and on Quick Take by Bloomberg. This is a Bloomberg Business Flash.
And I'm Karen Moscow. It is 6:47 on Wall Street. Futures are higher this morning. We go to the First Word breaking news desk for today's morning call. Here's Bill Maloney. Bill, good morning.
And good morning, Karen. That's right. U.S. futures are climbing right now. Dow futures up 120 points. S&P's gained 12, while NASDAQ futures climb by 40. The U.S. 10-year yield at 1.64%. Gold trading higher by 10. And Shanghai gained 1.7% overnight. Note that China said it will lower tariffs on $75 billion on U.S. goods next week. European markets are also trading higher, led by gains in Germany. And back in the U.S. on the economic front at 8:30, non-farm productivity, unit labor costs, and initial jobless claims. After the bell last night, Qualcomm beat estimates. And regarding some of the earnings this morning, Estee Lauder EPS beat estimates. Look for Bristol Myers and Philip Morris to report around 7 a.m., Kellogg around 8. In deal news, SAIC buys the U.S. federal business from Unisys for $1.2 billion. And in other news, Tesla is down another 4.4% in the pre-market after yesterday's 17% drop. Wrapping things up, Kansas City Southern was cut to market reform at BMO. Plains All-American raised to buy at Goldman Sachs. And General Dynamics raised to overweight over at J.P. Morgan. Live from the First Breaking News Desk, I'm Bill Maloney. Karen?
All right, Bill, thank you. And to hear live breaking news over your Bloomberg, type squawk on your terminal, SQUAWK. And that's a Bloomberg Business Flash. Now here's Michael Barr with more on what's going on around the world. Michael.
Karen, Senate has voted to acquit President Donald Trump on charges he abused his power and obstructed Congress. Utah Senator Mitt Romney was the only Republican to break with his party and find Trump guilty of seeking a political favor from the Ukrainian government. The Department of Homeland Security says that it would no longer let New York residents enroll in its trusted traveler programs because of a new state law that blocked federal immigration officials from accessing motor vehicle records. The law allowed people without legal permission to be in the U.S. to apply for driver's licenses. In the NBA, the Nets beat the Warriors 129-88. The Celtics won. In the NHL, the Rangers won. The Bruins won in overtime. And finally, from Daybreak on the Bloomberg, he was a handsome, cleft chin actor who made more than 80 movies. Three-time Oscar-nominated actor Kirk Douglas has died. Some of Douglas's greatest movies included Spartacus and Gunfight at the OK Corral. His Oscar-winning son, Michael Douglas, said on Instagram, "To the world, he was a legend, an actor from the golden age of movies who lived well into his golden years." Nathan, Kirk Douglas was 103.
Yeah, and I'm glad you mentioned Michael Douglas's comments because he really was one of the last ties to the golden age of Hollywood. And to think of how he persevered after suffering that stroke more than a quarter century ago, if you can believe that. I mean, it's just a life to celebrate, Michael, for sure.
You're exactly right. Global news. 24 hours a day on air and on Quick Take by Bloomberg, powered by more than 2,700 journalists and analysts in more than 120 countries. I'm Michael Barr. This is Bloomberg Nathan.
Go seek out his movies now. Thank you, Michael. We are live from the Bloomberg Interactive Brokers Studios. We're at 6:50 on Wall Street. And it's now time to check what's going on in D.C. Some of the top stories in the nation's capital include President Trump attending the National Prayer Breakfast this morning, then later today meeting with the president of Kenya. Pete Buttigieg and Bernie Sanders in a virtual tie in Iowa with nearly all precincts reporting, and Iowa Democrats accusing Trump supporters of flooding their vote reporting hotline as the post-caucus postmortem continues. Also making news this morning, the president declaring total vindication from his impeachment trial and planning a speech about it from the White House. Let's get more now from Bloomberg U.S. politics editor Kathleen Hunter. We got word of this address, I guess you could say, Kate, from the president's Twitter account yesterday. He says he will talk about our country's victory for the impeachment hoax. So what will you be listening for at noon Wall Street time today?
Well, I think I would expect the president to lean hard into the idea that this was a politically motivated witch hunt. That has been his argument all along, and I think that the Senate acquittal certainly gives him some latitude to try to make that argument anew just as the campaign season's heating up. And so I would expect him to, this is going to be an example of Trump unbound. He's going to go big here and talk about, how the Democrats have gone after him and, in his mind, very illegitimately, and use the vote yesterday, hold that up as an example of, why this is all behind him now.
Interesting to term it Trump unbound, given that we got the one vote from Republican Mitt Romney siding with the Democrats. I guess that raises a question for me. Does that still provide something of a guardrail on the president?
Well, I think it'll be interesting to see if and how Trump talks about the Romney vote during his speech today, because it certainly does detract from the argument that the White House is trying to make, because it is very significant that Romney made the decision consciously to become the first senator of a president's party to vote to remove that president from office. And so that does, send a strong signal that really cuts against the argument and the narrative that Trump and the White House are trying to put forward. So I think it'll be interesting to see if Trump mentions it. I think strategically it would make sense to kind of gloss over it, but we know how Trump is, and it might be difficult for him to avoid a mention of it. There's been some tweets, from the White House and from Trump himself talking about Romney's decision thus far, and it certainly seems to be getting under their skin.
Do we have a possibility of kind of seeing contrasting messages from the president this week when we had the State of the Union address where he was focusing on economic accomplishments, now potentially to be contrasted by whatever he has to say about impeachment?
Yeah, in a way, it strikes me as a bit of a weird move or a bit of a head scratcher for the Trump administration to kind of hold this press conference, or for Trump to hold this press conference at the White House today to essentially spike the ball, right? I mean, they've gotten what they wanted. The focus now, strategically seems to be wanting to shift the emphasis to the economy and Trump's, what he sees as wins there. So to hold a press conference or hold a news event, essentially not a press conference, but to hold a big public speech to draw still more attention to impeachment seems a bit strange to me. But I mean, there certainly is going to be a very positive message from the president coming out of this.
Yeah, it will be interesting to see whether it turns out just fundamentally to be a speech or a news conference. I guess we'll find out at noon Wall Street time when we carry the president's remarks live here on Bloomberg Radio. Let's turn now in our last couple minutes here to the state of play in the Democratic presidential race. Still a lot of confusion about the Iowa caucus. Does that still have an impact?
I think it does. I think that really the big winner coming out of Iowa now, we have all but 3% of the precincts reporting. So, we're going to get some additional results, but I think that the landscape of what this has done to the race is pretty well established at this point. And I think that the key takeaway is that this is a big win for Pete Buttigieg. It basically solidifies his standing as one of the top tier candidates heading into New Hampshire. Now, that is a bit of a double-edged sword. Obviously being a top tier candidate is what every presidential aspirant is looking to do. But at the same time, that then raises the expectations, and particularly with the next state being New Hampshire and Sanders and Warren, Bernie Sanders and Elizabeth Warren having had significant leads there, there's always this risk of such high expectations that he's now going to have to live up to, and the next state up doesn't necessarily look like it's shaping up to be a particularly good one for him. That being said, we have to see what happens.
Yeah, it should be emphasized that Pete Buttigieg is one of the front runners in this race, because the Bernie Sanders campaign just announced this morning its fundraising for the month of January, $25 million. That is a significant haul, and he's still got a lot of strength in this race.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think, certainly what I think Iowa has done, and, what some of the fundraising numbers and the coverage since Iowa has established the fact that Joe Biden is no longer necessarily the front runner, that there's, a cluster of candidates at the top, and perhaps no clear front runner at this point. And Sanders, certainly his big fundraising haul is a very big positive for him. It sets him up well ahead of not just New Hampshire, South Carolina, and Nevada, but Super Tuesday, which is coming up quickly in March. And so I think that he is definitely a candidate to watch. And, we may see him, he and Buttigieg are really neck and neck in Iowa. We may see him edging Buttigieg in the end. And then if he goes into New Hampshire and has a big win there, which of course is a big if, that could position Sanders very, very well.
All setting up a fascinating debate in Manchester, New Hampshire tomorrow night. And you can hear that live right here on Bloomberg Radio beginning tomorrow at 8 p.m. Wall Street time. Bloomberg U.S. Politics Editor Kathleen Hunter, thank you as always. Karen?
All right, Nathan, thank you. It is 6:56 on Wall Street. It's time for the Bloomberg Small Business Report, and here's John Tucker. John.
Yeah, good morning, Karen. Retailers have long complained about the more than $100 billion they spend each year to accept electronic payments. Now, to fight back against those fees, small merchants sometimes do set minimum purchase amounts for customers using credit cards, even though that's a violation of their merchant agreements. Now, Visa is planning the biggest changes in a decade to the interchange rates. They're hoping to persuade more people to abandon checks. They're adjusting their fees for new businesses, such as ride-hailing services. The payment processors are already updating their systems and readying the merchants for the new rates. They'll be rolled out in April and October. For a traditional Visa card, the fee on a $100 transaction will climb to $1.99 from $1.90. For premium Visa cards, the fee will rise to $2.60 from $2.50. And that's the Bloomberg Small Business Report. Karen.
All right, John, thank you. And futures are higher this morning. S&P futures up 13 points. Dow futures up 136 and NASDAQ futures up 48. The DAX in Germany's up 0.7%. We continue to watch NYMEX crude oil up 1.1%, up 56 cents at $51.32 a barrel, while Brent is up 0.4% or 24 cents at 55.52. The euro is at 1.0999 against the dollar. British pound at 1.2964, and the yen this morning is at 109.93. Bloomberg Surveillance with Tom Keene, Jonathan Farrow, and Lisa Abramowitz. Straight ahead. For Nathan Hager, I'm Karen Moscow, and this is Bloomberg.
Keys. Check. Phone. Check. 70s playlist downloaded? Check. Nice. There's one more thing you should check before you leave. Your travel. There's a new cycleway under construction between Kensington Olympia and Brentford Town Centre, so expect delays due to lane closures at the junction of Kew Bridge Road and Chiswick High Road. Plan ahead at tfl.gov.uk. To the Mayor of London and TfL, every journey matters.
At Ring, we've reinvented the doorbell. So no matter where you are or what time of day, you can watch over your home and the things you care about. Ring Video Doorbell streams HD video and two-way talk straight to your phone, so you can speak to whoever's at your door from anywhere.
Delivery.
Oh, great. Could you leave it with my neighbour, please?
Sure, no problem.
And it's so simple, you can install it yourself in minutes. See, hear and speak to whoever's at your door from wherever you are with Ring Video Doorbell. Available at ring.com and selected retailers.
5 is in! What a run! Touchdown, Kansas City!
Congratulations to the Kansas City Chiefs on winning their first Super Bowl in 50 years and second in franchise history.
50, Watkins, 10, chase to the 5, into the end zone, touchdown! That may be all she wrote!
While the NFL's 100th season may be over, football never stops on TuneIn. Search NFL Podcast to stay current with all the off-season wheeling and dealing. And get ready for the 2020 NFL Draft in April.
Which segments of Alphabet's business are most likely to come under scrutiny?
Get all the pieces.
They're getting mixed signals from governments.
He's failed to gain traction.
Bloomberg Radio, the Bloomberg Business Radio.com and iHeartRadio apps and BloombergRadio.com. Bloomberg, the world is listening. From the financial capital of the world, 24 hours a day at Bloomberg.com, on the Bloomberg Business app, and on Quick Take by Bloomberg. This is Bloomberg Radio. This is Bloomberg Surveillance Economics.
I think the U.S. is going in for a couple of years of very, very strong growth.
The deficit by early in the next decade will start to become a real problem for the markets.
Finance.
The consumer is really strong right now.
We don't realize how good times are now.
Investment.
The biggest problem that people have in investing in stocks is that they get out of the market.
It's not supposed to be easy. Anyone who finds it easy is stupid.
Bloomberg Surveillance with Tom Keene and Jonathan Farrow on Bloomberg Radio.
From New York City, for our audience worldwide, good morning, good morning. This is Bloomberg Surveillance. Coming up on the program, stocks at record highs, investors gripped by fear of missing out, China moving to half tariffs on some $75 billion of US imports, and a warning from Europe. German data showing the worst isn't over yet. From the Bloomberg Interactive Brokers Studio, hello Thursday. Here is your Thursday morning price action. Equity futures up 0.4% on the S&P 500, set for a fourth straight day of gains. We advance 14 points. In the bond market, set up as follows in treasuries. Yields going nowhere on 10s at 1.646%, coming down 2 basis points on 30s to 2.12%. And in foreign exchange, to give you a feel of the FX market, the euro going absolutely nowhere. Sterling just a little bit weaker, coming down 1/3%, Tom.
And 109 handle on euros. Well, you talk about fear of missing out. I'm Fogs. Fear of getting started. How many people out there? I walk in, we're at 29,400, record SPX futures, record Dow futures. You walk in and you just, if you're a gloom crew, you're getting hammered.
You missed out on the rally of 2019. You got hammered, and you're feeling more of the same in 2020. I'm looking at some of the headlines coming through, Tom.
Yeah, headlines are amazing.
I'm just trying to make sense of it. China will halve tariffs on some $75 billion of imports from the US. This is reciprocating a US action. It's part of the Phase 1 trade deal. So essentially, China is set to do what it had already agreed to do at a time that it really needs to do it, and there's people out there saying that should support stocks.
Well, it's a news flow, and you see it within that Bloomberg story. You also see it within the force majeure announcement by CNOOC, the idea of China saying, enough, this is what we're going to do. These are the contracts we have. They're busted because of the virus. And I should point out, in Germany, an absolutely jaw-dropping election in East Germany. David Folkerts-Landau earlier was brilliant on it. The language in the Bloomberg story, I can tell you, I have never seen in my adult life.
Well, Tom, never mind the politics. Talk about the data as well. Lisa, German factory orders soft. The ECB coming out and saying we've got limited headspace to respond. Doesn't look good for the continent, does it?
No, and it raises a question of how much the coronavirus is sort of an excuse that people are using for weakness that's going to be ongoing. But there's a bifurcation, and I think that this is sort of one of the big conundrums in markets right now. Europe continues to be weak, even though people were expecting a rebound. China is a big black box in terms of the coronavirus impact. Earnings in the U.S. coming out still strong. I mean, Twitter just reporting better than expected. Shares up. So some of the tech darlings still kind of chugging in there, leaving people with this question of, well, the FOMO trade still works, right? So this is sort of some of the sort of undercurrents with the U.S. still sort of strong and the rest of the world continuing to weaken.
Uber Bull Tom Lee reaffirmed his uberness here this morning as well. You can bring in our lovely next guest. He stunned me with his China GDP call.
Let's bring in Jeff Curry, shall we? Goldman Sachs Global Head of Commodities Research. Stun us all, Jeff. What is the call?
Well, when we look at the current coronavirus pandemic, we'd say the biggest impact is coming from the quarantine. You know, you're shutting down factories, shutting down schools, shutting down transportation to and fro China. Obviously, oil sits at the center of this because it's both the activity inside China as well as the travel in and out of China. The question is, how long will this go? I think most people are budgeting sometime till at least early March. After that, I would tend to think you get a rebound, and I think you'll get stimulus that's focused on the consumer to boost consumer confidence. So you get much more of a V-shaped V-shaped check-type recovery coming out of it. And so the question is, what does this do to activity in the second half of the year versus today? We think all the weakness is up in the near term. With oil, it sometimes is 2x the economic weakness because you're shutting down all those interconnectivities. But when you look, let's say, out 4 months, 5 months out, we'd expect to rebound right back up to the same levels that we were at before, and actually even be on a faster growth path.
So one of the biggest demand shocks since the financial crisis, arguably, but with a key caveat that you think this is transitory, you think we get a V-shaped recovery. What are the risks around that view? What are the risks around that view that you can identify, that you can say, if that materializes, if X happens, we've gone through an inflection point, I'm going to change my mind?
I think there's two. One is that we've disrupted supply chains around the world. It becomes much more difficult to restart. We don't know that yet, and that we've seen that historically. The second issue is the contagion. Now, the reason why it's having such a profound economic impact today is they're trying to contain the contagion by doing a largest quarantine I've ever seen in my lifetime, which is why you're having the sharp drop today. But I would say the bigger issue is we don't know the parameters of the contagion.
A lot of people are saying that this is the containment largely having to do with the slowdown in the economy. I was reading about the Spanish flu of 1918. The death rate was very similar to the coronavirus. It was a 1 to 2% type of fatality rate, but it spread so widely that 50 million people died. What's your concern that perhaps people are underballing the potential impact of the coronavirus, saying it's going to be fine, even if it's not contained, as basically everyone says it will be, and it escalates into something that does.
Let's go back to why they call it the Spanish flu. Spain was the only one that had a media that reported on it. There it was an issue of transparency, and they weren't on top of it. This is the exact opposite. They are so much on top of that. The extent of the quarantine really demonstrates that the ability to maintain the contagion is unprecedented. I mean, you're paying an economic cost for it today. But the contagion is more contained than I think we've seen in any of the other events.
So given that, are you surprised that we're not seeing more of a boom to oil prices today, given the fact that it's risk on?
Because where this oil is going is it's going into storage in China, or it's being backed up onto the global market. Commodities are spot assets. They have to price today. Financial markets are anticipatory assets. They price tomorrow. So oil has to pay the price for the day. All the commodities have to pay the price today. The financial markets can price the much more positive story that we see, let's say, in July or August.
So arguably we're seeing that, Jeff. So let's talk about the stimulus response, shall we? At the moment, you think we're going to see some real stimulus in the back half. I just wonder what they'll do, because at the moment it's very, very short-term stuff. Liquidity to banks, cutting rates on that liquidity to banks, all of that good stuff. When do we start to see the longer-term measures?
I think you got to know, we don't even know when this ends, when they can actually start doing it. I think at this point right now, they're trying to maintain and deal with the virus as opposed to focusing on the economic growth. So we're just watching for some evidence of the restart. We have a bunch of different high-frequency variables we're focused on, everything from real estate transactions, power generation. Once we see that begin to rebound, I think that's when people are going to focus on these other issues.
So what does Riyadh do? I mean, if the oil demand craters in China and it's oil one price, Brent crude, how does OPEC and how does Saudi Arabia react to what you're predicting?
Well, the question is how much of this is backed up onto the global market.
Exactly.
And, we would estimate by looking at crude runs in China, it's probably somewhere around 1 million barrels per day as opposed to the full demand hit. So when you think about the numbers that the JTC, the Joint Technical Committee of the OPEC, recommended last night, they were somewhere around 600,000 barrels a day, which is not too far off the mark, and that probably manages the external surplus for a few months.
For a few months. And the great call here of your 4.0% GDP call is it's going to be a recovery. Can you model that recovery now to a few months, or is it just you just don't know?
Don't know. I think that's why I'm surprised that the equity market is so positive, because you do have.
Well, it's Costin's fault. Blame it on him.
That's right. Yep, David.
But the equity markets. Why would you suggest, as a commodities guy, why Costin's world has a bid into it because they're looking at a SARS-like recovery here 2-3 months out. I mean, that's the end of the discussion.
Yeah, because I think that the view is, hey, you got a lot of problems you're dealing with, but the quarantine is so large that's most likely going to be effective, and you put just a very low probability tail risk of something bad happening.
Explain to our audience this phrase, force majeure. We've got CNOOC, the LNG crew, saying, no, we don't think so. I mean, every other company today, frankly, outside of China as well, and Singapore, is getting out the Latin book. Force majeure. Is that Latin, John, or French? I can't remember.
You're doing okay, Tom.
Is it force majeure March?
Yeah, it's going to be not only in commodities and particularly oil. We see it quite a bit. You're going to see it across all types of goods. And it goes both directions. Not only stuff going into China, but stuff coming out of China, particularly some of the key commodities that they produce, like steel and aluminum.
Jeff Curry's on the show, so we have to wrap things up by getting the gold call. What's the gold call now? What is it? What's the dynamic around that metal that you're thinking about?
By the way, the one thing I did not anticipate was the ding to jewelry demand in China being significant. It's significant at the margin. Gold's trading, 1670 and change right now, or 1570 and change right now. Our target is 1600. We were pretty close to it a few weeks ago, but this demand hit has taken some of the tinge out of it. We're still positive. We view gold much more as a strategic allocation trade as opposed to a directional trade. So if I were to highlight the key issues, geopolitical risk, de-dollarization, I think is a big one. Central bank buying of gold last year was the highest since the Nixon era, representing 22% of global supplies. So the net of that, we see some modest upside near term.
Your clients, the guys that you speak to on a daily basis, are they becoming more sympathetic to your view? Are they boosting their allocation to gold in their portfolios? Is that something you've witnessed over the last 12 months?
In Europe, they can't get enough of it. But remember, they have negative bond yields. In the U.S., it's a hard call because, the bond yields are still positive here. So it really depends on where you are in the world.
Can central bank policy affect your world?
Absolutely.
You get a rate cut. Hatsia says 1 rate cut, 2 rate cuts, whatever he's saying. Does that help commodities find a bid?
Not as much as stimulus coming out of China, but it is a positive development.
This has been superb. Jeff Curry, thank you so much
with
Goldman Sachs with a really important call there in China GDP before the market clears.
Should get you some news from New York City, worldwide, with Michael Barr. Good morning, Michael.
Good morning, John, Tom, Lisa. With the president's impeachment trial now closed, one prominent GOP senator is feeling the heat from the president after he broke from the party ranks during the final vote yesterday. The president ripped Mitt Romney on Twitter into the night. Trump tweeted, "Had failed presidential candidate Mitt Romney devoted the same energy and anger to defeating a faltering Barack Obama as he sanctimoniously does to me, he could have won the election." Meanwhile, Romney says he's prepared to hear backlash from members of his own party, but said in the end he came to this decision because he thinks it's the right thing to do.
I'm sure to hear abuse from the president and his supporters. Does anyone seriously believe that I would consent to these consequences other than from an inescapable conviction that my oath before God demanded it of me?
The president will give a speech at noon Wall Street time today on his acquittal, and Bloomberg will carry it live. The latest round of results from the Iowa Democratic caucuses show Pete Buttigieg with 26.2% over Bernie Sanders with 26.1%, with 97% of precincts reporting. Meanwhile, Joe Biden, who came in fourth, is hoping to pull off a win in New Hampshire's primary next week. Biden speaking at a town hall in Somersworth took aim at one of his main rivals, Bernie Sanders.
He calls himself a democratic socialist. Well, we're already seeing what Donald Trump is going to do with that.
As for Buttigieg, Biden says it's a risk to nominate someone who has never held an office higher than mayor of a town of 100,000 people. Global news 24 hours a day, on air and on Quick Take by Bloomberg, powered by more than 2,700 journalists and analysts in more than 120 countries. I'm Michael Barr. This is Bloomberg. John, Tom, Lisa?
Michael Barr, thanks so much. Futures up 14, Dow futures up 132, the VIX 15.24. Tom Lee with some interesting comments on the VIX at a 15.24 versus being set lower, as we would see given these markets. The level on futures, S&P 3349, extraordinary to see that level. Dow futures were 29,400-ish, 29,372. Yields in fractional.
Asset managers who seize change to launch new strategies, add distribution channels, or exploit new technology to re-engineer the investor experience are often rewarded. However, in an industry paralyzed with complexity, few act with agility or decisively. Few run their businesses strategically, yet the most competitive managers in the market know with the right partner and a flexible operating system, you can. Go boldly toward change with SEI Investment Manager Services.
I'm Steve Meyer, president of SEI's Investment Manager Services. At SEI, we understand the emerging forces that will define success for asset managers and what firms will need to compete tomorrow. That's why we continually optimize SEI's global operating platform. If your business requires greater agility, our advanced technology, integrated best-in-class systems, and multi-asset expertise can be your catalyst for business transformation.
With SEI Investment Manager Services, you lead the charge in a competitive marketplace. Learn more at seic.com/seize change.
Business is constantly evolving. Is your financial printer evolving to keep ahead of the curve? At Command Financial, we are redefining financial printing by providing industry-leading expertise, leveraging technology, and honing processes and best practices. Every day, Command helps SEC registrants, as well as members of their working groups, including securities attorneys and investment bankers, prepare, file, and disseminate regulatory and disclosure documents, such as registration statements, M&A documents, and mutual fund prospectuses and reports. Command provides a full range of services to help you effectively complete your deal, meet your disclosure requirements, and achieve your shareholder communications objectives. Visit our website at commandfinancial.com and learn how we're evolving, not only with the times, but also with your business requirements. Command Financial, redefining financial printing.
Influential conversation.
Imagine carving your way through the fresh snow falling right now in the Austrian resort of St. Anton. Fly to Innsbruck and head to the slopes from only $29.99. Book now with EasyJet. One way per person, limited availability. See easyjet.com.
Whatever job you're searching for, you can find it on LinkedIn. First jobs, flexible jobs, keep me out the cold jobs, advertising jobs, accounting jobs, HR, PR, even ER jobs, East London jobs, West London jobs, extra hour in bed jobs, startup jobs, late start jobs, get home in the daylight jobs, banking jobs, building jobs, flexible working on a Friday jobs, or even voiceover jobs, which is how I ended up recording this ad. Search millions of jobs on LinkedIn and find one meant for you.
Finding your perfect new home can be tough. So if you keep missing out,
it's time to search at On the Market.
There are thousands of new properties to buy or rent every month at onthemarket.com. 24 hours or more before they're on Rightmove or Zoopla.
On the Market.
See them first. Set up a property alert today.
Search onthemarket.com to find your perfect home.
If you're in the market, search onthemarket.com. See onthemarket.com/new and exclusive. Agents specify exclusivity.
Headlines and breaking news 24 hours a day at Bloomberg.com, the Bloomberg Business app, and on Quick Take by Bloomberg. This is a Bloomberg Business Flash.
And I'm Karen Moscow, 717 on Wall Street. And Bloomberg Daybreak is out on customer terminals, bringing you all the news you need to start your day. Let's get a check at the latest headlines with Hannah George at the Bloomberg Daybreak desk. Good morning, Hannah.
Good morning, Karen. President Trump will take an impeachment victory lap with an address at noon from the White House. He was acquitted as expected, but Mitt Romney sided with the Democrats, becoming the first senator ever to vote to remove a president from his own party. The coronavirus death toll has passed 560, while confirmed cases rise above 28,000. Governments, including India and Hong Kong, are now putting more restrictions in place for travellers from China. Qualcomm and Peloton reported earnings that disappointed Wall Street. Qualcomm warns revenue from 5G will take longer than expected. Guidance from Peloton fell short of estimates. And China will cut tariffs on $75 billion of US imports in half. That takes effect on Valentine's Day, when the US also plans to trim its levies on Chinese products. For all the news you need to start your day, check out Daybreak on your mobile phone on the Bloomberg Anywhere app. Karen.
Hannah, thank you. S&P futures up 12 points. Dow futures up 119. NASDAQ futures up 46. The DAX in Germany is up 0.7%. 10-year Treasury up 1/32, yield 1.64%, and the yield on the 2-year 1.43%. NYMEX crude oil is up 1.1% or 56 cents at $51.31 a barrel. COMEX gold up 1/3% or $5 at $15.67.80 an ounce. The euro 1.10 against the dollar, British pound 1.2963, and the yen 109.90. And that's a Bloomberg Business Flash. Tom, John, and Lisa.
Karen, thanks so much. 5 things you need to know to start your days. Thank you, Interactive Brokers, for this. John, I've got to start with this, and you get lucky. We book people, folks, because we like them, the good conversation. We know you love most of our guests, all of our guests. David Folkers Landau with us in Deutsche Bank, and Johnny, he was riveting on Germany today. Here's a quote from Patrick Donahue in our story. This is the language of one of Ms. Merkel's assistants. CDU lawmakers in Thuringia willingly accepted that their votes could elect a state premier supported by Nazis. That's a public official in Germany. This was stunning. Folkers Landau was on fire.
Well, let's talk about what happened, and then you can tell me what Folkers Landau said. So Chancellor Merkel's centre-right CDU party voted alongside the anti-immigrant party, which is known as AfD. So to put a candidate from the pro-business FDP into power in an eastern region in Germany. So essentially, it was Merkel's CDU voting alongside the AfD, which is something that we never thought would happen, and now has happened. And Merkel and the whole party, I think, is up in arms about this. I'm very, very angry.
I will say, without editorializing, Lisa, that David Folkers Landau was visibly moved on our London set.
Well, there's the backdrop that's really concerning, right? And this is the idea that there are a lot of people who feel left behind by the economic expansion there. And this is sort of spurring a lot of the populist feelings that we're seeing around the globe. And the manufacturing data overnight just sort of confirms that, with factory orders down the most in a decade in December. And it raises a question just sort of to the ECB's point, to Christine Lagarde, saying basically we're running out of ammunition. I'm paraphrasing. These are my own words, not hers, but saying that there are limits to what the central bank can do, especially in light of new threats like the coronavirus.
Yeah, I've made the point so many times on this program that when you assess any policymaker, you need to think about their ability and willingness to act. The ECB has displayed an incredible willingness to act over the last couple of years. Quite clearly, their ability to act has diminished considerably over the last year.
Don't want to spend a lot of time on this. Mitt Romney yesterday, just one story from the past, AUH2O, which was Barry Goldwater, 1964. And Mitt Romney, Karen Tumulty killed this in the Washington Post today. His father was George Romney, who saved AMC in Michigan years ago and became Michigan governor. And he's the one that tried to stand up to Barry Goldwater and what was perceived as extremism, particularly on civil rights in 1964. And it was remarkable to see Senator Romney of Utah hearkening back to so many of the elements of his father in my childhood.
This time, however, there is a question of whether he will be rewarded by the voters. And this is sort of the tension for him and for others. And I think that this is sort of the underpinning of what we saw in Congress yesterday. It's unclear whether Utah will support him in his going up against President Trump and voting for him to be convicted on one of the two accounts of impeachment.
Do you think a few people from the Democrats need to apologize to Mitt Romney for the way they treated him a number of years back in the presidential election? Dragged his name through the mud, Tom.
I don't disagree. It was really extraordinary yesterday. Thanks to our Washington team from Iowa onto the State of the Union for their coverage there. John, Tom Lee melt up the Uber bull, and he reaffirmed it today at Dow 29,363.
There's just something uncomfortable about this rally. Just something really uncomfortable.
He said that off the mic.
Look, the lack of humility around some of the beliefs that this is all going to be okay. I'm not saying it's not going to be.
He said
I just think there's so much we don't know yet. So many risks around that consensus view. We're just not there yet.
My concern, especially on a day like today, you're seeing bonds rally, actually. You're seeing Treasury yields come in, even as equities are poised to open higher. And I find this really interesting because we got that weaker than expected German data. And there's a question of the narrative heading into this where the world was slowing. The global economy was slowing before the coronavirus.
You're dead on in that, Lisa, in that we had equities up, yields lower. Then we reverted to the norm, equities up, yields up, and we've come back today to what we saw, John, 10 days ago?
The argument of last year just was not resolved. The tug of war between weak manufacturing and resilient services. There was a hope this year that would be resolved in a beneficial way for the global economy. We're not there yet. And now you've got a serious hit to growth as well. Some real doubts. And I want to bring you this quote from Tobias Lefkovich of Citi. Good friend of this program. Pretty much every client we talk to wants to buy the dip, and that is not comforting. While there may be some good news on potential slowing of the outbreak, we are reticent to think the impact is behind us.
Well, and JP Morgan analysts coming out and recommending that people cut their long exposure to to equities at this point, given the fact that they do feel like positioning has gotten ahead of itself, that people are a little too confident that the coronavirus will be contained.
Jeffrey Curry, 4.0%. He did not mince words. He says a quarantine slowdown.
Yep.
But then I believe I heard on the back, Lisa, to your good question, Mr. Curry suggests a rapid recovery.
V-shaped.
V-shaped.
That's the story. One-off hit and it's transitory. And that's become the consensus view quite quickly. Not necessarily sure it's the correct one, but it's the one a lot of people are getting comfortable with, that we come out the other side okay and we come out quickly.
Here's my struggle. People are already pricing in the V-shaped recovery now. We're getting the V-shaped recovery in stock prices, but we're not getting it in any kind of economic.
Or is it wall of money? I mean, is it a Jeffrey Yu bull market where it's just a wall of money? Lee was encyclopedic on this, the money that's out there.
Yeah, well, one of JP Morgan's arguments is that you're not seeing confirmation in spreads. You're not seeing the same kind of risk-on build-up feeling in corporate debt. And you are seeing an ongoing feeling of discretion.
Could you hear my hatred yesterday with Doug Cass? He was giving me the Red Sox treatment on this trade. His friend James Palmer, who lives next door to him down in Florida, said, worst trade in history. He threw the orb for the Baltimore.
Do you want to tell us what the trade was?
The trade was...
No, obviously he doesn't.
A pitcher, not to be named, going to L.A. And
a
so
pitcher
they threw
that you didn't like.
Yeah, they threw in Mookie, just, so they could get the deal done.
Let's be clear, you didn't like the pitcher. The pitcher won you the World Series.
Yeah, but that was just a brief shining moment. Do they do this in the Premier League? Would they do? Who's the guy for Liverpool? The Dutch guy we were talking to the Prime Minister
Virgil
about?
van Dijk.
Would they trade Virgil van Dijk to the Tots?
They would need a ton of money, and I mean hundreds and hundreds of millions to make that happen. From New York this morning, good morning. You're listening to Bloomberg Radio.
Imagine being denied an apartment because of your religion, or your race, or because you have children, or a disability.
It's so wrong. Yes, but who has the power to stop this?
You do. Each of us has the power. The law is on your side. It's illegal for landlords to discriminate because of race, color, religion, sex, national origin, disability, or familial status. If you suspect that you have experienced housing discrimination, file a complaint with HUD immediately so we can investigate it. Fair housing is your right.
Use it.
To learn more, visit HUD.gov/fairhousing. That's HUD.gov/fairhousing. Or call 1-800-669-9777. 1-800-669-9777. A public service message from HUD in partnership with the National Fair Housing Alliance.
Why do hedge funds and other alternative managers rely on Pershing for a highly personalized experience? Mark Alderati, a managing director at BNY Mellon's Pershing and head of Prime Services, explains.
In today's fast-paced environment, where the only constants are change and volatility, you need a prime broker who's both steady and agile, focused on supporting your needs so that you can focus on growing your business and producing results. Exceptional client service and advocating for our clients is at the core of what we do. Our award-winning high-touch team is just one of the benefits of working with BNY Mellon. We help alternative investment managers create great experiences for their clients. Whether it's customized financing, securities lending solutions, platform access, or outsourced trading, BNY Mellon's Pershing is a prime broker who's committed to this business and dedicated to meeting your evolving demands.
To learn more about the unique and industry-leading solutions for hedge funds and other alternative managers, visit Pershing.com. Pershing LLC. Member FINRA, NYSE, SIPC. This is a Bloomberg Money Minute.
For up to 50% off selected floors and beds, and up to an additional £250 off your total flooring order. Carpet Right for life. Terms and conditions apply.
Keys. Check. Phone. Check. 70s playlist downloaded. Check. Nice. There's one more thing you should check before you leave. Your travel. There's a new cycleway under construction between Kensington Olympia and Brentford Town Centre, so expect delays due to lane closures at the junction of Kew Bridge Road and Chiswick High Road. Plan ahead at tfl.gov.uk. To the Mayor of London and TfL, every journey matters.
You know what it's like when you can't find your debit card? Panic. That's what it's like. Until you realise, as a Halifax Visa debit card holder, that you can freeze your card on the spot. Control your Halifax Visa debit card with the Halifax mobile app. Easy as.
You can only freeze certain transaction types. Terms and conditions apply.
Why would anyone shop at TK Maxx? I don't have the time.
Well, you can still look fine, 'cause there's big brand deals at TK Maxx online.
Ooh, TKMaxx.com.
Ridiculous possibilities are here to stay when you TK Maxx the right way.
Broadcasting live from the Bloomberg Interactive Brokers Studio in New York. Bloomberg 1130 to Washington, D.C. Bloomberg 99.1 to Boston. Bloomberg 106.1 to San Francisco. Bloomberg 960 to the country. Sirius XM Channel 119 and around the globe. The Bloomberg Business app and BloombergRadio.com. This is Bloomberg Surveillance.
From New York City, this is Bloomberg Surveillance for our audience worldwide. We're live on Bloomberg Radio. Equity futures advance 11 points on the S&P 500, up a little more than 1/3%. Equities up, treasuries going nowhere. Yields coming in about a basis point to 164 on 10s, down 2 basis points on 30s. Your yield 2.12%. In foreign exchange, we talked about the lack of price action on euro dollar. The euro dead flat against the dollar. Sterling just a little bit softer. And to give you a view on the commodity market, Tom, which has been brutal over the last couple of weeks, we bounced back a little bit. WTI by another 0.9%, $51.21.
I looked at iron ore. It is not, iron ore Singapore has not bounced back. And maybe it's an older quote. Maybe we'll get something in 6 hours is different. But I want to make clear the bounce up. I mean, copper, I looked today. I looked at Chicago copper, not LME copper.
Why is that?
And it's up 3-4 days in a row.
Yeah.
It's a bounce.
After a record-losing rout of about 14 days of losses.
Well, did you see the chart? I mean, you were highlighting it, Tom, all morning on television, the incredible demand for iron ore. About half of the entire demand globally comes from China.
Okay. Right now, Henrietta Trez joins us. She's Director of Economic Research, of course, with Veda Partners. Henrietta, we need to talk about the fractured polarization in Washington, but I've got to ask you what you thought of the Romney moment yesterday. I mean, how did that fit into the floor, the Senate, the House that you know?
Well, it was certainly very unwelcome news for Republican leadership. We had been with staff there throughout the day in real time, just understanding that they were extremely displeased with Senator Romney's decision to get so vocal. The immediate fear is for him to see some substantial backlash and obviously
but I don't mean to interrupt, but I think it's so important. Like what backlash? You can't get on the squash court? I mean, what actually happens to the senator from Utah?
I don't know that the senator from Utah is the one that's most at risk, but any of the vested interests who have supported him are now going to get nothing of their agenda accomplished.
Like Chuck Schumer.
Like Chuck Schumer, sure, or any of the trade associations who have donated to him or who are looking to him to advance any of their legislation. One of the issues that I'm not particularly familiar with, but something to do with college sports and his legislation and impetus there. Something came up there. Just the manifest options for them to sort of squeeze him are the focus now.
I mean, you're a grizzled pro on this, so just one more question on the politics of it before John gets to policy. But is he a Democrat in Utah now? I'm fascinated by what happens in his state right now. I mean, it's like, 4 Democrats in Salt Lake?
Yeah, exactly. And it was interesting to see the Utah Republican Party and the junior senator from Utah, Mike Lee, respond, saying essentially, the senior senator, we don't agree with anything that the detractors had to say, really teaming up against him. So that internal politics of Mitt Romney in the state, I think, will be interesting to watch. They were certainly very unhappy.
Henrietta, the media publications you'd expect to play this up are playing this up, but let's be honest, it'll be a footnote in the history books. We'll move on to the election very, very quickly in November, so let's focus on that. If you want to win elections, you're probably going to need a few people from the other side of the aisle to cross over. And the made-for-Twitter moments that might entertain the base that we've seen from the Democrats over the last week or so, it's just turning off everyone else. And there is a conclusion that many people have come to on both sides of the aisle over the last couple of days, that the president has had a very good week. How does he capitalize on that, Henrietta?
Absolutely. I think probably the most important data point was the underwhelming turnout in Iowa earlier. That is a story that doesn't get enough attention. But if Democrats are going to win in 2020, they have to depend on a massive voter turnout, and that's something that just didn't show up in Iowa. So when you think about the president's good week, potentially, as described to us by Republican leadership, maybe his best week ever, that's probably the number one driving factor. So Democrats have to fix what's gone on in the last week immediately, get to New Hampshire, figure out if Buttigieg is going to get a bounce from this, figure out if the establishment's going to firm up behind Biden. They have a lot of decisions to make. The conversations I heard from investors on the road were regularly intoning that Mike Bloomberg has a chance to really drive and pull away here to take on the nomination, and the party is pretty unprepared for that, in my opinion.
Of course, Mike Bloomberg, the founder majority owner of Bloomberg LP, the parent company of Bloomberg News. And Henrietta, for the market, it comes down to something quite simple. Do we get a progressive candidate or a moderate out of the Democrat side? What are you looking for in New Hampshire? What's the read-through from Iowa to New Hampshire next week?
The most important thing to me is that Bernie Sanders is underperforming in New Hampshire versus 2016. He got 60% of the vote there in 2016. He's getting 24% or so now. I think that's the story. So the potential for a more moderate candidate continues to be my most likely outcome. I doubt that it would be Klobuchar, so I think the contest is between Biden and Pete Buttigieg at this point. And Buttigieg has some momentum, but very little minority support. So it's always been my view that other candidates must win both Iowa and New Hampshire. Biden doesn't need to win either. So his firewall in South Carolina and Super Tuesday make me comfortable with that.
And there's a question of what the narrative will be among the Democrats in terms of how to counter the strong economy and the trade achievements that President Trump has made. I'm wondering what you think of particularly the trade developments, as China does say that they will have tariffs and some $75 billion of imports from the U.S. later this month, as we do seem to get progress across the board. What's the sort of narrative that he can use versus the counter narrative?
Well, the counter narrative is one that we're hearing from Democrats and increasingly from Senate Republicans behind the scenes, which is that the tariff rate reduction China announced overnight is potentially being driven by a increased sense of reality that China's going to miss its purchase commitments. That's the most important thing. Democrats would obviously seize on that immediately. It's got ramifications for Senate races as well as the administration. The key states of Iowa and North Carolina are both major pork producers. They're looking for massive shipment commitments from China in that space. And they, importantly, both have Republican senators at risk for re-election in 2020. Joni Ernst in Iowa and Tom Tillis in North Carolina. So for Democrats right now, what they are seizing on is this very real anxiety from farm state Republican senators and congressmen that China's going to miss its purchase commitments, and that this drop in tariffs was driven by that. And the potential for coronavirus, the African swine fever, or whatever, to impact their ability to hold true to their purchase commitments, which behind the scenes, they'll tell you they think President Trump inflated beyond what China was able to commit to in the first place.
Well, Henrietta, let's talk about these commitments, because there is a clause in the Phase 1 deal that in the event of natural disaster or unforeseeable events, you can consult, either side can get together and try and work something out. As far as you can see, have we seen that from China as yet? Because I haven't seen any official statement from either side that suggests they have made that approach. And do you expect it to happen in the coming week?
No, we haven't seen that approach. I think that the administration is starting to telegraph that the coronavirus is a pretty severe issue, and so that might smooth the way for eventually having those conversations. They're at least laying the groundwork to make that an option that's available to folks. If we eventually get there, China has not, to my knowledge, done that yet. There is obviously some conflicting reporting going on around there. But I think that given that the option is escalating tariffs further from here, which is extraordinarily unwise going into an election 8 months away. My expectation is that if they do miss purchase commitments, there will be a very real willingness to blame it on coronavirus or whatever and engage in further talks.
Henrietta, one final question after this history made yesterday and really over the last few weeks in Washington. What happens today in Capitol Hill? Do people just come in and get their coffee and sit in their offices numb, or what's the to-do list on Capitol Hill today?
There is no to-do list. I imagine everybody will go retreat to their corners and come back and talk about appropriations in a few weeks. There's no to-do list.
Henrietta, thank you so much. Henrietta Treasley.
Thank you,
just
Henrietta.
Brilliant. That was just brilliant. Thank you again. With futures up 12. The Bloomberg NJIT STEM report brought to you by New Jersey Institute of Technology, a top 100 national university in the latest U.S. News and World Report college rankings. Learn more at news.njit.edu. Here's Bob Moon.
Tom, Jonathan, Lisa, good morning. Here's what's making news in science, technology, engineering, and math. 2 universities in the Northeast have received more than $1 million to study whether voice assistant devices, such as Amazon's Alexa, could help detect early signs of memory problems. Researchers from Dartmouth Hitchcock Health and the University of Massachusetts Boston got the 4-year grant from the National Institute on Aging. The funding aims to improve the early detection of dementia or Alzheimer's. The team plans to use machine and deep learning techniques to develop a system that, if successful, would allow for better planning and support for patients. We've come a long way from this. You remember Atari, don't you? The arcade game company that ushered in the gaming revolution of the 1980s plans to open 8 video game-themed hotels across the U.S. The company said this week it will break ground on its first hotel later this year in Phoenix. Atari says it wants to create a unique lodging experience, combining the iconic brand with a video game-themed destination. In addition to Phoenix, hotels are eventually planned in Las Vegas, Denver, Chicago, Seattle, San Francisco, San Jose, California, and Austin, Texas. That's the Bloomberg NJIT STEM report. Tom, Jonathan, Lisa?
Bob Moon, thank you very much, sir. Bob Moon there with the NJIT STEM report. It's time now for your news, your headlines worldwide. We'll do that with Michael Barr. Good morning, Michael.
Good morning, John. Tom, Lisa. The Iowa Democratic Party has released more results from Monday's caucus, with 97% of precincts reporting Pete Buttigieg and Bernie Sanders are still at the top, with 26.2% and 26.1% respectively. Elizabeth Warren has 18.2%, and Joe Biden is still in fourth at 15.8%. President Trump will take a victory lap and deliver a speech today about his acquittal in his impeachment trial. Trump will speak at noon today, Wall Street time, and Bloomberg will carry it live. A 12th confirmed case of the coronavirus was announced in Wisconsin. Doctors say the person was sent home to self-isolate and that there is no concern for the general public in the U.S. Dr. Nasia Safdar with the UW Health University Hospital in Madison explains why the patient was allowed to leave the hospital.
They did not have clinical symptoms that warranted hospitalization, and they had a support system at home that would include being able to self-isolate properly.
More than 7,300 people are stuck on 2 cruise ships off Hong Kong and Japan over concerns passengers and crew were inadvertently exposed to the Wuhan coronavirus by infected passengers. On the ship near Japan, passengers will be quarantined for the 14-day incubation period. NASA astronaut Christina Cook has returned to Earth after the longest single space flight by a woman. NASA Flight Control announced the landing early this morning in Kazakhstan.
And it looks like Soyuz MS-13 carrying Christina Cook, Luca Parmitano, and Alexander Skvortsov has touched down.
Cook also completed the second longest single space flight by any American astronaut with her 328-day space mission. Global news 24 hours a day, on air and on Quick Take by Bloomberg, powered by more than 2,700 journalists and analysts in more than 120 countries. I'm Michael Barr. This is Bloomberg. John, Tom, Lisa.
Michael Barr, thank you very much, sir. Thank you very much indeed. We have to turn our attention now to the data in 24 hours' time. Call it 25. We will have the payrolls report in the United States of America. Your median estimate 163 in our survey as things stand, up from 145. We'll get a little appetizer of the labour market a little bit later this morning at 8:30 Eastern. Initial jobless claims will be coming out. Your estimate there 215, your previous read 216. In the markets then, let's get you up to speed on some price action, shall we? Equity futures advance 1/3% on the S&P 500, up by around about 11 points. We are set for our 4th straight day of gains in the bond market. Here we go for treasuries, yields unchanged at 165 on 10s.
Renminbi through 6.97.
A little bit more confidence, right?
Issue.
Just a little bit more confidence out there. See it reflected in the commodity market too, Tom. Crude up by 0.6% on WTI at $51 and around about 5 cents. From New York this morning, good morning. This is Bloomberg Surveillance on Bloomberg Radio.
With the Bloomberg Business of Sports Report, I'm Michael Barr. Hedge fund billionaire Steve Cohen is said to be ending talks to buy the New York Mets, walking away from a deal that some fans had hoped would give new life to the franchise. Cohen was in advanced negotiations to buy 80% of the Major League Baseball team at a league record valuation of $2.6 billion. According to the New York Post, the deal fell through because the current Mets owners, the Wilpons, changed the terms at a late stage. The Chicago Cubs must face, for now, a sports psychology author's lawsuit alleging a Cubs employee retweeted copyrighted material from his book. According to an Illinois federal court, the team may be able to evade the infringement suit if it can establish that a retweet isn't a copy. The case hinges on a gray area in the law that might permit widespread sharing of copyright-protected material online as long as the person sharing didn't create a distinct copy on a server. And that is a Bloomberg Business of Sports Report. I'm Michael Barr.
Message and data rates may apply. T&C and privacy terms can be found at babbel.com/terms. Please don't text and drive.
Have you wanted to speak a new language, but you thought it'd be too hard or take too much time? Then try Babbel for free by texting EXPLORE to 64,000. In just 15 minutes a day, you'll be on your way to speaking a new language in just a few weeks. And right now, you can try Babbel for free. Babbel starts out teaching you words and phrases by matching them with pictures. You won't believe how easy the interactive program is. Soon the sentences get a little bigger, and before you know it, you're having simulated conversations voiced by native speakers. And because Babbel is crafted by language experts and uses the spaced repetition method, in just 10 to 15 minutes a day, you'll be speaking the language of your choice with real confidence. With Babbel, you can speak a language. Just text EXPLORE to 64,000 and start your first lesson in the language of your choice for free. Download the Babbel app or text EXPLORE to 64,000 and try it for free. Text EXPLORE to 64,000.
Global news 24 hours a day, on air and at TikTok on Twitter. Powered by more than 2,700 journalists and analysts in over 120 countries. This is Bloomberg Radio. Now, a global news update.
President Trump plans to speak publicly about yesterday's acquittal vote in the United States Senate.
For up to 50% off selected floors and beds, and up to an additional £250 off your total flooring order. Carpet Right for life. Terms and conditions apply.
Keys. Check. Phone. Check. 70s playlist downloaded. Check. Nice. There's one more thing you should check before you leave. Your travel. There's a new cycleway under construction between Kensington Olympia and Brentford Town Centre, so expect delays due to lane closures at the junction of Kew Bridge Road and Chiswick High Road. Plan ahead at tfl.gov.uk. To the Mayor of London and TfL, every journey matters.
Otto Sergey now checks for better energy deals so you don't have to. Meaning we can all sit back and relax. Can't we, Sergey? Sergey?
Hey? What?
Tell the people that we can sit back and relax.
Oh, we can sit back and relax.
Oh, don't waste energy worrying about energy. Automate it with Otto Sergey. Compare the market. Keep life simple.
Customer preferences determine alerts based on tariff type, payment type, supplier rating, and minimum annual saving of £50.
Hours a day at Bloomberg.com, the Bloomberg Business app, and on Quick Take by Bloomberg. This is a Bloomberg Business Flash.
And I'm Karen Moscow. U.S. stock index futures rising this morning as China's plans for tariff cuts on U.S. imports added to optimism the global economy will weather the hit from the coronavirus. We check the markets every 15 minutes throughout the trading day on Bloomberg. S&P futures up 12 points, Dow futures up 120, NASDAQ futures up 44, the DAX in Germany's up 0.7%. 10-year Treasury up 1/32, yield 1.64%, and the yield on the 2-year 1.43%. NYMEX crude oil is up 0.4% or 19 cents at $50.94 a barrel. COMEX gold up 1/3%, up $5.20 at $15.68 an ounce. The euro 1.0998 against the dollar, British pound 1.2973, and the yen 109.91. A busy morning for earnings. We're watching Twitter up more than 7.5% this morning. It topped analyst projections for fourth quarter revenue and added more daily users or new daily users than expected. Yum Brands' fourth quarter worldwide comp sales missed analyst estimates. Shares are down 2.1%. 1%. Philip Morris International, the international seller of Marlboro's, forecast that profit this year will be lifted by sale of tobacco sticks for IQOS devices. Bristol-Myers Squibb posted better than expected fourth quarter revenue and earnings, though sales of its blockbuster immunotherapy drug Opdivo stumbled. Shares are up 2.7%. And that's a Bloomberg Business Flash. Tom, John, and Lisa.
Karen, thanks so much. We welcome all of you coast to coast. Sirius XM Channel 119, Washington. A Mookie Betts-less Boston. We do not say good morning to Los Angeles.
Why not?
Because Mookie's in Los Angeles.
I'll say
it's
good morning,
Los
Angeles.
Yeah. In San Francisco, good morning as well. What we're going to do here, John just chastised me. It was a surveillance chastisement. Jobs Day, boom, it's there.
Tomorrow.
I had no idea. It's like we just had Jobs Day.
It's come around quickly, hasn't it?
It's come around quickly. Torsten Slack joins Deutsche Bank right now. Quickly, I know Lisa's got some great stuff off your research she wants to talk to. Torsten, frame Jobs Day and the idea of a sub 4% permanent unemployment rate. How permanent is an Eisenhower unemployment rate?
Well, this is the big issue. I mean, if you look at the unemployment rate at 3.5%, it's the lowest level in 50 years. And if you think about the tailwinds that the economy has gotten from both a very significant fiscal expansion, we have financial conditions at the highest levels and best levels basically ever, at least since the Chicago Fed and the St. Louis Fed started measuring it. And on top of that, we have basically super easy monetary policy around the world. So with that backdrop, of course, an unemployment rate of 3.5% is not surprising. But what is surprising is GDP growth still is only around 2% despite these significant tailwinds. But it's clear the labor market is doing well, and it has been doing well for some time, and we expect it to continue to do well.
Torsten, most people agree with you. I'm just wondering, though, looking at things at the moment, whether the Fed's reaction function will now allow us to really test the depths that unemployment can go to. Do you expect them to sit back and just let this thing run through to a two-handle?
Well, as we spoke about, you and I in Davos, if you think about what's going on at the moment, that both the Fed and the ECB are now doing a review of monetary policy. And if you listen carefully to, and I know you do that, what Jay Powell was saying at the last press conference, he was basically saying the main reason why we're doing that is because we really don't have a good understanding of inflation. And this is also what Lagarde said today, the Parliament. We really are trying to do a review because we want to understand inflation better. So the long answer to your question is that if the issue here is that inflation is difficult to understand why it's still so low, given the unemployment rate is now at the lowest level in 50 years, maybe they are both, the ECB and the Fed, opening the door here to allowing rates to stay lower for longer. So one way of looking at the reviews is exactly to try to argue, well, we haven't really seen much inflation for the last 10 years, so hey, maybe we don't really need to raise rates as quickly going forward.
Torsten, one thing that you do so phenomenally in your charts that you put out on a daily basis is you underline the tensions that are emerging below the sort of very good rosy picture of the U.S. economy. You talk about how CapEx spending at companies has been coming down, even though we do see an expansion in the economy and higher prices. You show that, rates on auto loans have been going up for U.S. consumers, even though you've got benchmark yields heading lower across the board. I'm wondering at one point these tensions rise to some sort of systemic concern, not necessarily for another crisis, but for some sort of slowdown that perhaps is not being priced in.
Absolutely. So when I listen to surveillance every morning, I hear exactly a discussion about are markets driven by, is it the central banks that are driving things? Is it liquidity that's coming from the ECB, from the Fed, even the BOJ? Is that what I should be investing based on? Or should I actually be investing based on the fundamental fear that maybe some of the credit fundamentals, in particular with subprime auto loans, in particular with some of the things going on in levered loans, CLOs, some of the lower quality credit is showing some signs of being weaker, specifically to the chart that you mentioned, Lisa. If you look at some of the issues with delinquency rates for auto loans have really been going up, and that's the reason why interest rates on auto loans have been going up, and that's the reason why you begin to wonder, well, if 20% of all auto loans are subprime, if we're now entering a situation where total car sales, as you know, at an annual rate is about 16, 17 million, and if 20% roughly of that goes to subprime borrowers, is there a risk that if subprime borrowers begin to fall behind on their payments, which is happening even though wages are going up for people at the bottom of the income distribution and their unemployment rate being so low? Absolutely. The first place to look for any risk here is credit quality. That it's really a tug of war between credit quality at the bottom of the credit spectrum, both for corporate credit and consumer credit, and at the other end of the rope, you have the central banks banks saying, no, don't look too much at that. We just want spreads to be narrow.
Torsten, we could discuss this for the next 2 hours. Unfortunately, we only have about a minute. I'm curious from your perspective, at what point this moves from just being a credit-specific issue, a buyer beware for auto loans if you're going to be a lender, to something that indicates a broader weakness with the consumer that's been driving the U.S. expansion?
Exactly, that is the key question. So think about this. If you have, at the top you have AAA, at the bottom you have CCC. We're starting slowly to see some tensions at the bottom, at the CCCs, and even the single Cs and double Cs. And therefore you start to think about, well, maybe if we're beginning to move higher, meaning up in credit quality, is it the case that something that when you go up in credit quality that you're beginning to see deterioration in fundamentals? One specific issue, if you look at the levered loans downgrade to upgrade ratio has been moving higher. So maybe spreads are super tight. I appreciate that, but maybe we should be doing our homework at the bottom and looking at actual fundamentals.
Torsten, very quickly, it's a theme today on surveillance. What is the Deutsche Bank readjustment of China GDP forward?
So we have tried to think hard about the transmission channels of the coronavirus, and the short answer to that is that we will see a fairly significant hit in Q1, and then we do expect to see almost a full rebound in Q2. So overall, year-over-year, GDP growth should be only 0.2% lower. So in other words, the net effect of the coronavirus is relatively modest, but the impact in Q1 is fairly significant.
Torsten Slok, thank you so much at Deutsche Bank. Greatly appreciate that today. A lot of different opinions here, folks. I've got a fan distribution chart on the Bloomberg I've set up of all the different.
I thought you were going to say you've got a fan then.
No.
I was in shock.
I know, we're up to 14 listeners.
We've got 14 listeners.
With Torsten.
That's fantastic.
It's very good. But thank you for listening, Torsten, every morning to Bloomberg Surveillance.
He's your fan.
Yeah, then he watches the Open at 9 a.m.
I hope he does.
He does not watch the Real Yield at 1 p.m. Fridays.
He watches replays on Saturdays and Sundays.
He does. He's right with Matt Lozzetti as well. Futures up 9. Dow futures up 91. The self-promotion over. Yields come in. Lisa making a note of that. 10-year in 1 basis point. 1.64%. This is Bloomberg.
Why has J.D. Power ranked Commonwealth?
Let's get this right, sir. You didn't see 3 men dressed as clowns take off in a van with a Renaissance painting because you were distracted by, and I quote, a sporty red compact SUV with a bold mesh grille, a sculpted bonnet with sweeping roofline on diamond-cut alloys.
And beautiful rear haunches.
So, you saw a Jaguar E-Pace. But what about the clowns?
What clowns?
Jaguar E-Pace, designed to steal attention. Search Jaguar E-Pace.
For up to 50% off selected floors and beds, and up to an additional £250 off your total flooring order. Carpet Right for life. Terms and conditions apply.
Finding your perfect new home can be tough. So if you keep missing out,
it's time to search at On the Market.
There are thousands of new properties to buy or rent every month at onthemarket.com. 24 hours or more before they're on Rightmove or Zoopla.
On the Market.
See them first. Set up a property alert today.
Search onthemarket.com to find your perfect home.
If you're in the market, search onthemarket.com. See onthemarket.com/new and exclusive. Agents specify exclusivity.
Keys. Check. Phone. Check. 70s playlist downloaded. Check. Nice. There's one more thing you should check before you leave. Your travel. There's a new cycleway under construction between Kensington Olympia and Brentford Town Centre, so expect delays due to lane closures at the junction of Kew Bridge Road and Chiswick High Road. Plan ahead at tfl.gov.uk. To the Mayor of London and TfL, every journey matters.
Winter joggers of London, it's chilly. Your legs are caked in mud and your nose is running faster than you. Then, get that heating on. You deserve it. Thanks to Hive Active Heating, you can control your heating wherever you are with a tap of the app, which could save you up to £120 a year by never having to heat an empty home. Buy today and get a free Amazon Echo Dot. Search Hive Heating. Hive services require broadband and Wi-Fi. Terms apply.
Otto Sergey now checks for better energy deals so you don't have to. Meaning we can all sit back and relax. Can't we, Sergey? Sergey?
Hey? What?
Tell the people that we can sit back and relax.
Oh, we can sit back and relax.
Oh, don't waste energy worrying about energy. Automate it with Otto Sergey. Compare the market. Keep life simple.
Customer preferences determine alerts based on tariff type, payment type, supplier rating, and minimum annual saving of £50.
5 is in! What a run! Touchdown, Kansas City!
Congratulations to the Kansas City Chiefs on winning their first Super Bowl in 50 years and second in franchise history.
50, Watkins, 10, chase to the 5, into the end zone, touchdown! That may be all she wrote!
While the NFL's 100th season may be over, football never stops on TuneIn. Search NFL Podcast to stay current with all the off-season wheeling and dealing.
And get ready for the 2020 NFL Draft in April.
You love TuneIn for live breaking news from CNN, MSNBC, Fox, CNBC, and more. But when you can't catch your favorite show as it airs, it might just be a click away as a podcast. Search your favorite news station to explore all the on-demand news shows on TuneIn.
Start hearing more of what you want.
Upgrade to TuneIn Premium and get over 45 commercial-free music stations, live commercial-free news, and every live NFL, MLB, NBA, and NHL game. Visit TuneIn.com/premium to upgrade.
I always talk about the losers in a trade war.
You benefit if you're just further away from China.
So that you can too.
What are the ramifications if she crumbles or doesn't crumble?
Bloomberg Radio, the Bloomberg Business, Radio.com, and iHeartRadio apps, and BloombergRadio.com. Bloomberg, the world is listening. From the financial capital of the world, 24 hours a day at Bloomberg.com, on the Bloomberg Business app, and on Quick Take by Bloomberg. This is Bloomberg Radio. This is Bloomberg Surveillance Economics.
American economic power and future depends on trade deals.
In many of these countries, we're still seeing people struggling.
Finance.
We're in this vortex of uncertainty. These big companies, they just sometimes lack focus.
Investment.
The markets have become a little bit too addicted to the Fed.
Timing the market is just so difficult.
Bloomberg Surveillance with Tom Keene and Jonathan Farrow on Bloomberg Radio.
Good morning, everyone. John Farrow, Tom Keene, Lisa Abramowitz with us as well today. Markets on the move. When I walked in the door, I'm going to call it record high in equity futures. Not there right now. Futures up 10, Dow futures up 91. Lisa, you note, odd, we've reverted back where we were a week ago. Equities up, yields lower, non-correlated.
Yeah, interesting to see how the economic data coming out of Europe, weaker than expected, the manufacturing slump in Germany really extending. And there's a question here of how much the coronavirus scare is masking the trend that we already saw with yields lower and growth globally being downgraded.
Politics, major politics out of Germany this morning. And, of course, America looking at the Romney vote yesterday. And, of course, the president's scheduled to speak today as well. Is it a formal speaking? Is the president have a time?
Yeah.
He's going to speak. Yeah.
He's going to speak later. It's going to
John, as you mentioned in the polling, they had Axios. I think the president was up to 49% from 45%.
It's a victory lap. What a week it's been. Absolute chaos in Iowa for the Democrats. Still don't think we've got the full result from there, do we? Don't think we do.
No, 97%. And what's the summary? I mean, I've been so busy looking at Germany that
the summary: Biden and Warren, the big losers,
really got to show something.
They've got to show something, and they are taking. They're eating humble pie. But you have basically Buttigieg and you have Bernie Sanders neck and neck. Too close to call.
We'll have our coverage 7 p.m. Tuesday night, I believe, is that time. I may have the time wrong, but I'm guessing on that as well. Right now in the equity markets, and it's important. We had Tom Lee in earlier. I guess he's going to be with us later as well here on Bloomberg Surveillance and Uber Bull. Jim Paulson, I would say, John, has been more measured. He's not. I can't call Jim Paulson an Uber Bull, but that he's ensconced out in the Midwest gives him a different perspective than the churning Friday afternoon gloom of the East Coast.
Let's compliment him and call him a deep thinker.
I can't compliment him. The Minnesota Twins affected the trade between the Dodgers and the Red Sox. It's Paulson's fault we lost Mookie.
Okay, let's bring him in. Luthhold Group Chief Investment Strategist Jim Paulson. Good morning to you, Jim. Great to be with you.
Good morning. Good morning.
I want to bring you a Citigroup quote. It's from Tobias Lefkovich, who said pretty much every client we talk to wants to buy the dip, and that is not comforting. Are you comfortable with this pickup of the last 4 days?
Well, I guess I'm kind of focused on two things. I think more than anything, I know the coronavirus, and it could be bad. I'm no expert on it, but I think the data, by and large, has just been too good of late. Particularly the United States. If you just think about the ADP yesterday, the ISM reports, both manufacturing and service, factory orders, confidence measures. The Atlanta GDP right now forecasts first quarter GDP in the United States of 2.9%. earnings numbers have been pretty decent coming out overall. And it's hard to keep a market down when you just where you're getting bombarded with data which suggests a fair amount of economic health and a revival going on in the manufacturing sector. And if you combine that with the other big thing is I just don't see the pressure right now to tip the bull in a lasting, sustainable way. I mean, you just think about it. Is inflation a problem right now? Or labor, capital, or commodity costs hurting companies? Are credit spreads suggesting there's some big debt crisis right now? Is the money supply too tight? Is fiscal policy too tight? Are foreign policies too tight? Are bond yields too high? Or are they going up too much? There's just no pressure. And until we get some of that, I guess I'm going to tilt towards the bullish side. I don't think you want to be maximally bullish, but I think you want to stay that way until some pressure enters the system.
Jim, maybe it makes sense to have a bullish tilt, but towards the United States. As for Europe, as for Asia, I'm not sure we can make the case that the data's been encouraging. We've basically seen very, very early signs of a stabilization, a bottoming out in places like China and Europe. And I guess the worry for a lot of people is that the events of the last month or so will shake us off course once again. Is that something you're thinking about, Jim?
Well, it's certainly worth monitoring. There's no doubt that the coronavirus is going to have, some impact on world growth, and particularly the closer you are to the epicenter of China, the greater it's going to be. But I also think the market can look through that too, John, a little bit. I mean, for example, we know Boeing is going to be a hit to first quarter growth in the United States. We know Corona is going to be a hit as well. But in the second quarter it might not be. In the third quarter might not be. And the market can look through that, understanding a one-quarter hit. I actually like the Eurozone, by the way. I see quite a bit of evidence of pickup there. I know we get a bad report here or there, but you look at the economic surprises going on in the Eurozone, they picked up dramatically. And you look at the zoo economic forecast there, which has been a great indicator of the next 6 months' growth of Eurozone GDP. That's up. So I think we went into the coronavirus with the manufacturing recovering across the globe, and that's a much better place to go into this than it would have been last summer.
Jim Paulson with us with Luthor Group. One of the charms of Mr. Paulson, folks, is at the end of his research piece, he actually puts his predictions in single lines, which leads to a 3-hour interview. Let me pick one topic. You suggest yields migrate 110 basis points up from a 163 to a 275 by the end of the year. That's price down, yield up. Why should I own fixed income right now?
Yeah, that may be too aggressive, Tom. We'll find out about that. But I still think the primary risk for this year is that the U.S. economy, particularly the global economy in general, turns out to be better than everyone thought. And if it is, that's a good thing initially. But I also think at a 3.5% unemployment rate, we're going to push inflation and commodities higher again and bring some pressure to bear not only on the Fed but on bond markets. I think inflation expectations go back up. A lot of the inflation aggregates, wages aren't that far off from their highs. Core CPI inflation is pretty close to its highs for this cycle. And then if you look at like the median CPI from the Cleveland Fed or the trim CPI, they just keep going up.
Yeah.
So if you recharge growth again, and particularly if you bring back manufacturing as well, I think we're going to get into overheat concerns by the end of the year, and maybe we do have a 2.5, 10 yield or 2 3/4,
right?
Which would be a big move.
So this is where the narrative gets really hairy and tough for me to square, because what you're saying is the economy in the U.S. in particular is better than people expected. Frankly, globally is better than people are pricing in. If you look at Europe as well, you're saying that we may see some inflation pressure pick up by year end. And yet, when people say they are going into risk assets right now, one of the main reasons they cite is that we've got Federal Reserve stimulus, and we've got right now more than a rate cut, more than a full rate cut priced in as almost a certainty by the end of this year. How much does the lack of central bank liquidity under your scenario, because they wouldn't have to cut if everything's going just golden and if we have inflation, how much would that stymie the rally that we're seeing in risk assets?
Well, I think eventually pressure would cause a problem, and it depends on how fast it comes back. Stimulus itself to me is not the catalyst. It's what stimulus does. that's the catalyst. And right now, the stimulus of the last 12 months is starting to show green shoots of new growth. Pickups in ISM reports from around the globe, improved economic growth across the spectrum. And that's not the result of what they're doing now. That's the result of what we did over the last year. That's the result of dropping the bond yield from 3.25 to 1.5, from money supplies picking up last year. And so what they're doing now will affect us, but it probably won't affect us until we get closer to year end. And I think between where we are now and worried about overheat pressures, worried about lack of liquidity, worried about policy tightening, between this point and that point is probably still a pretty bullish outcome for stocks overall, because I think earnings have to pick up first, and if they do, I think the market makes a move higher before we worry about overheat pressure.
Jim, let's put some capital to work then, shall we? We've got valuations, multiples at the higher end of this bull market through the last 10 years or so. The likes of Apple trading well through 20 times forward earnings. Where do you park the money? Where do you put the money to work if you think things are going to get better? If there is upside risk, as you've pointed out in this conversation, where do you put the capital to work to capture that story?
So, John, the values aren't good. I agree. They're not like record highs, but they're certainly high, and you got to hold your nose a little bit against that. And that's why I'm saying I don't think you'd be maximally bullish, primarily because of valuations. But there would be a few things that I'd look at, and I would stay with tech, because the not well kept secret is that investment spending in old era pursuits is weak, but new era investment spending has been really strong, and it's continuing to drive tech stocks. I think they're going to continue to outperform. But I'd move to small and mid cap names and away from the FANG names from here. I'd also look at the international markets. You know, the surprising story, if I look at the China ETF right now, relative to the SPY in the United States, the SPDR, it has been a market performer almost since last May. So who cares about the trade war? Who cares about the coronavirus? Right. China's kept up with the U.S. stock market. So I think it's okay to buy the emerging markets. I think it's okay to buy some cyclicals here that have been beat up as well.
Is Tesla cyclical, Jim?
No. I don't know what Tesla is, Tom.
713 right now.
Myself.
I bought 10 shares at 960.
I guarantee you did.
Jim Paulson, thank you so much for Luthor. Greatly appreciate it. Love the clarity of his note. Lisa?
It's interesting. He's talking about buying tech stocks. I do just want to note that Twitter shares up more than 8% ahead of the market after saying that they added more subscribers than people expected and had more free cash flow also than had been anticipated by analysts, just sort of showing, again, on the balance, some disappointments within big tech in the U.S., but really, I mean, Amazon delivering, Twitter kind of delivering. Interesting to see Uber after the bell today.
Twitter still needs to clean up the website. The amount of trolls on that website just drives me insane.
Don't get me started. People know I'm active, and they're way behind.
It's just ridiculous.
Way behind.
Drives me insane. Yeah. We should do a segment on that at some point ahead of the election.
Well, you know,
let's get
some
news,
though. To David Kirkpatrick and that as well. Right now with the news in New York City, here's Michael Barr.
Tom, John, Lisa, thank you very much. With the president's impeachment trial now closed, one prominent GOP senator is feeling the heat from the president after he broke from party ranks during the final vote Wednesday. The president ripped Mitt Romney on Twitter into the night. Trump tweeted, had failed presidential candidate Mitt Romney devoted the same energy and anger to defeating a faltering Barack Obama as he sanctimoniously does to me, he could have won the election. Meanwhile, Romney says he's prepared to hear backlash from members of his own party, but said in the end he came to this decision because he thinks it's the right thing to do.
I'm sure to hear abuse from the president and his supporters. Does anyone seriously believe that I would consent to these consequences other than from an inescapable conviction that my oath before God demanded it of me?
The president will give a speech at noon Wall Street time today on his acquittal, and Bloomberg will carry it live. The latest round of results from the Iowa Democratic caucuses show Pete Buttigieg with 26.2%, over Bernie Sanders with 26.1%. That's with 97% of precincts reporting. Meanwhile, as for the other candidates, they have moved now to New Hampshire to campaign for next week's primary. Global news 24 hours a day, on air and on Quick Take by Bloomberg, powered by more than 2,700 journalists and analysts in more than 120 countries. I'm Michael Barr. This is Bloomberg. John, Tom, Lisa.
Michael Barr, thanks so much. Futures up 9, up higher earlier, but churning, I'd call it, with a bid to the market, to say the least. Let me look at the foreign exchange complex, as they call it.
How exotic.
What you need to know is dollar strength, DXY. That's the blend of major trading partners. 98.28 had a 98.3 going there. These are all fractional moves, but they're David Bloom-like. They're just like dollar lift. Yen 109.84, euro with a 109 handle earlier, 110.0.
Rich is just a really good guy. The term good egg isn't enough to describe him. He's also certified organic and free range. Rich puts the cap back on everything. The toothpaste, the olive oil, the shampoo, everything. He lets his 10-year-old nephew beat him at virtual tennis, even though he can straight up slay his 10-year-old nephew in virtual tennis. When the toilet paper is running low, Rich replaces the roll on the actual holder, not just on the back of the toilet. Rich is texting and driving. Rich? No. What are you doing, Rich? I was just telling everyone how great you are. Texting and driving makes good people look bad. Visit StopTextStopWrecks.org. A public service announcement brought to you by the National Highway Traffic Safety Administration and the Ad Council.
Asset managers who seize change to launch new strategies, add distribution channels, or exploit new technology to re-engineer the investor experience are often rewarded. However, in an industry paralyzed with complexity, few act with agility or decisively. Few run their business strategically. Yet, the most competitive managers in the market know, with the right partner and a flexible operating platform, you can. Go boldly toward change with SEI Investment Manager Services.
Determination and operational strength are both essential factors for growth in asset management. I'm Steve Meyer, President, Head of SEI's Investment Manager Services Division. We know that disruptive forces create opportunities around the world. If you see potential in change, our industry specialists will maximize SEI's integrated platform of data and risk management, global investment operations, compliance support, and investor services to position your asset management business for success. Come grow with us.
With SEI Investment Manager Services, you lead the charge in a competitive marketplace. Learn more at SEIC.com/seizechange.
Let's get this right, sir. You didn't see 3 men dressed as clowns take off in a van with a Renaissance painting because you were distracted by, and I quote, a sporty red compact SUV with a bold mesh grille, a sculpted bonnet with sweeping roofline on diamond-cut alloys.
And beautiful rear haunches.
So, you saw a Jaguar E-Pace. But what about the clowns?
What clowns?
Jaguar E-Pace, designed to steal attention. Search Jaguar E-Pace.
For up to 50% off selected floors and beds, and up to an additional £250 off your total flooring order. Carpet Right for life. Terms and conditions apply.
Whatever job you're searching for, you can find it on LinkedIn. First jobs, flexible jobs, keep me out the cold jobs, advertising jobs, accounting jobs, HR, PR, even ER jobs, East London jobs, West London jobs, extra hour in bed jobs, startup jobs, late start jobs, get home in the daylight jobs, banking jobs, building jobs, flexible working on a Friday jobs, or even voiceover jobs, which is how I ended up recording this ad. Search millions of jobs on LinkedIn and find one meant for you.
Finding your perfect new home can be tough. So if you keep missing out,
it's time to search at On the Market.
There are thousands of new properties to buy or rent every month at onthemarket.com. 24 hours or more before they're on Rightmove or Zoopla.
On the Market.
See them first. Set up a property alert today.
Search onthemarket.com to find your perfect home.
If you're in the market, search onthemarket.com. See onthemarket.com/new and exclusive. Agents specify exclusivity.
Keys. Check. Phone. Check. 70s playlist downloaded. Check. Nice. There's one more thing you should check before you leave. Your travel. There's a new cycleway under construction between Kensington Olympia and Brentford Town Centre, so expect delays due to lane closures at the junction of Kew Bridge Road and Chiswick High Road. Plan ahead at tfl.gov.uk. To the Mayor of London and TfL, every journey matters.
8 points, S&P's gained 9.5, and NASDAQ futures climbed by 32. The U.S. 10-year yield at 1.63%, gold trading higher by 11, and Shanghai gained 1.7% overnight. Note that China said it will lower tariffs on $75 billion on U.S. goods next week. European markets are also trading higher, led by gains in Italy. And back in the U.S. on the economic front at 8:30, non-farm productivity, unit labor costs, and initial jobless claims. After the bell last night, Qualcomm EPS and revenues beat estimates. And regarding earnings this morning, Twitter beat on revenue and user growth estimates. Shares are up 7.5% in the pre-market. In deal news, SAIC buys the U.S. federal business from Unisys for $1.2 billion. And in other news, Tesla's down another 3% in the pre-market after yesterday's 17% drop. Wrapping things up, Plains All-American was raised to buy over at Goldman Sachs. General Dynamics raised to overweight at J.P. Morgan. And Micron raised a strong buy over at Raymond James. Live from the First of Breaking News Desk, I'm Bill Maloney. Karen?
All right, Bill, thank you. And here live breaking news over your Bloomberg. Type squawk on your terminal, SQUAWK. And that's a Bloomberg Business Flash. Tom, John, and Lisa.
Thanks so much. Damien Cesar with us now on emerging markets. John wanted to ask him a softball question. I'm going to go with a tough one first. Goldman Sachs says 4.0% China GDP short term. What does that do to your world?
That's first quarter, right? So it has to be right, because we're at 4.5. So yeah, first quarter, 4% GDP is not good for emerging markets.
4.0. What does that do to the Sasauer world?
Yeah. No, I mean, it's definitely going to weigh on all of the Southeast Asian bloc. I mean, so for me, I mean, look, if you just look at what they've been doing, I mean, they've been stimulating again. We saw Thailand, the Philippines. You're going to expect more of that, especially if the PBOC can't stimulate because there's inflation there, right? You've got food prices rising, you've got energy prices rising, and so they're going to look to other ways of stimulus in order to get the economy righted, but I don't know how quickly they're going to be able to cut rates there.
You're at 450 for Q1.
BI Econ is,
450 for Chinese GDP Q1.
Yeah, and 5.7 for the full year.
So coming out the other side pretty aggressively in a V-shaped recovery. Is that the consensus view? Are you behind that too?
I'm not. I think it's going to be very difficult for them to recover. I think Goldman's more right than probably we are. It's going to be very, very weak, and it's going to be there for far longer than we imagine. I mean, that's kind of what I'm looking at. And I think, if you just look at some of the central bank activity and the way a lot of people are aggressively downgrading their forecasts, I'm not alone in that.
Good luck when you go back to your seat and you just told all your colleagues that you think they're wrong. Goldman Sachs is right. Have a nice one with that one. I will say, I am looking right now at the MSCI Emerging Market Currency Index. I've been watching this. It is rebounding in tandem with the other risk assets. And I'm wondering, though, how much pressure there is on this call that we're going to see some sort of rebound in emerging markets based on the fact that positioning was pretty crowded heading into 2020. Long emerging markets, short the dollar.
I'll bring it all together for you, and I'll even go back to the China. If you look at dollar yuan realized vol 3-month basis, now above implieds. It's the first time we've seen that since July of last year. And if you remember, July led to August of last year. So what I'm saying is we just saw a pretty big move in actual terms in dollar yuan. It basically moved a lot, but implied vols aren't pricing that in, right, on a forward basis. So rest assured, whenever that kind of happens, you're going to see dollar yuan vol shoot up. So I do expect as vol goes up with the Chinese yuan, you're going to see EMFX come off pretty significantly off the back of that.
So do you think that we're going to see a big decline in emerging markets currencies?
I just think it's going to be persistent pressure. I mean, you just can't fight the dollar. You can't fight the IMF. You can't fight the dollar. And so, if you're of that belief, then it's going to be very difficult for you to put more money to work in some of these markets, especially with real yields coming off the way they have.
What do flows do? I mean, if we have a force majeure, CNOOC, the LNG people in China, this is a huge deal, folks, for them to invoke this legal phrase, force majeure, which basically says all our contracts are no good. Jeff Curry at Goldman Sachs says this is a trend we're going to see. What does that do to flows in your world, to trust in your world?
So it's interesting. Flows have definitely been coming off. I mean, we had accelerated pretty significantly. What I find interesting about that point on CNOOC, I looked at their 5-year CDS this morning, right? And it tracks the sovereign pretty closely. It had basically compressed to just about an all-time low at yesterday's close.
Which means
I haven't
that's
been able to
constructive.
Meaning exactly, it means that no one's really worried about it. And if you look at natural gas prices, they're basically shrugging it off as well.
Okay, explain this, oh wise one. Why are we seeing shrugging it off? Futures up 11 at SPX. We're seeing shrugging it off, and yet I got force majeure clauses being invoked.
Well, I mean, shrugging it off is in the same sentence with Tesla, Bitcoin, high yield new issuance in January at an all-time high. The list goes on and on. So, this is all a function of the fact that, look, I know I'm going to beat a dead horse here, but it's Fed stimulus, it's central bank stimulus, and basically there's a disconnect with asset valuation.
Let's talk about the stimulus then. Now I just focused on what China's about to do, because this whole market thinks we're about to get some real stimulus, and all I'm seeing is short-term liquidity measures. I'm not seeing real stimulus come out of China yet, you?
No, and I think that's exactly my point. It's going to be very difficult for them to just start slashing rates aggressively, especially with that big pile of distressed Chinese debt.
Hold on a second, though, because a lot of people said that they did not deploy their full war chest the last time around, the slowdown that we've been seeing. So this leaves them with more ammunition, particularly with respect to the shadow banking industry. Why do you think that's not the case?
And they have $3 trillion of reserves on paper that no one can see. So look, it's a matter of, what's there and what's not there. To your point, though, look, there is a lot of interest now. Here's another one. Golden Tree is trying to market a relative value Argentina fund. You've got guys sniffing around on the $1.5 trillion of Chinese distressed debt out there. This is all basically, where can I find my yield? I'm searching in, the far off places now. It's living on the frontier.
So you think that's all frothy?
I do. Look, I think, what's interesting about, Argentina right now, if I might go there, is, Buenos Aires basically just paid on that made that $250 million payment. So you saw a lot of this Argent debt just sort of the revaluation, the green shoots are back there. I'm really not buying it.
We're having a Mitt Romney Day. What's your binders full of research say? He's acclaimed for his phrase, binders full of this, binders full of that. What's the binders full of EM research you're going to publish today?
So I've been having a lot of fun, Tom. I'm glad you asked me that. I've been having a lot of fun with this new function called IQ, where you can take our Bloomberg Barclays indices and you can manage them any which way you want. And what I'm doing, and I'm disentangling Lebanon, Argentina, Venezuela from the distressed universe and finding that you don't get as much yield there. I was playing around, Peru, Romania, and Colombia being added to the global ag at the end of the year. Amazing. I can kind of...
Okay, freshman year in college, did you beat everybody in the dorm at risk? 3-on-2 Central
So I went to Vanderbilt University in freshman year. I don't think I went to class all that much, to be completely honest.
You know who's crushing in your fantasy football league?
I was playing a lot of Sega hockey. Yeah, a lot of Sega hockey back in 1992, for sure.
How did you do in the Super Bowl? Are you retiring this week? You need to make an announcement?
I won both my fantasy little games. Rich Truman will tell you,
You beat Rich?
Yeah, no, I beat Rich.
Seriously?
Like that.
So Rich is
Charlie
going to
Vollmer.
pay you?
Well, Charlie
You're going to
Vollmer
walk out of
Who
here
do you think
and they're going
pushed
to pay
Tesla
you.
parabolic? It was Damien. Damien says, thank you so much as always. Just brilliant there.
Rich in our ears right now shouting about getting out of the segment.
Yeah. Damien, seriously, folks, locked into all sorts of terminals looking at the Bloomberg Barclays Index. Futures up 11. This is Bloomberg. Good morning.
Business is constantly evolving. Is your financial printer evolving to keep ahead of the curve? At Command Financial, we are redefining financial printing by providing industry-leading expertise, leveraging technology, and honing processes and best practices. Every day, Command helps SEC registrants, as well as members of their working groups, including securities attorneys and investment bankers, prepare, file, and disseminate regulatory and disclosure documents, such as registration statements, M&A documents, and mutual fund prospectuses and reports. Command provides a full range of services to help you effectively complete your deal, meet your disclosure requirements, and achieve your shareholder communications objectives. Visit our website at commandfinancial.com and learn how we're evolving, not only with the times, but also with your business requirements. Command Financial, redefining financial printing.
Why is delivering the best client experience a top priority at BNY Mellon's Pershing? Michelle Feinstein, Director of Client Engagement, explains.
Today's investors want a financial relationship that's on demand, customized, and leverages the latest digital technology. At BNY Mellon's Pershing, Helping advisory firms and broker-dealers create great experiences for their clients is our priority. Through our integrated wealth experience, we give you a high-touch service, flexible technology choices, and expert insights, so you can deliver a highly personalized experience to your clients at every step, from onboarding to wealth planning, to performance analysis and more. And because we're part of BNY Mellon, you'll benefit from more than 230 years of strength and stability. At Pershing, we're personally invested in your success.
Visit Pershing.com to learn more about Pershing's integrated wealth experience. Pershing LLC and Pershing Advisor Solutions LLC are both members of FINRA and SIPC.
This is a Bloomberg Money... Keys. Check. Phone. Check. 70s playlist downloaded? Check. Nice. There's one more thing you should check before you leave. Your travel. There's a new cycleway under construction between Kensington Olympia and Brentford Town Centre, so expect delays due to lane closures at the junction of Kew Bridge Road and Chiswick High Road. Plan ahead at tfl.gov.uk. To the Mayor of London and TfL, every journey matters.
Having to deal with financial stuff can make you feel... ah! But at Money Supermarket, we make you feel... ah. That's because we go further to help you get money car. We don't just compare. We cut prices to help you get better car insurance deals. Get money car. Money Supermarket.
5 is in! What a run! Touchdown, Kansas City!
Congratulations to the Kansas City Chiefs on winning their first Super Bowl in 50 years and second in franchise history.
50, Watkins, 10, chase to the 5, into the end zone, touchdown! That may be all she wrote!
While the NFL's 100th season may be over, football never stops on TuneIn. Search NFL Podcast to stay current with all the off-season wheeling and dealing. And get ready for the 2020 NFL Draft in April.
Broadcasting live from the Bloomberg Interactive Brokers Studio in New York. Bloomberg 1130 to Washington, D.C. Bloomberg 99.1 to Boston. Bloomberg 106.1 to San Francisco. Bloomberg 960 to the country. Sirius XM Channel 119 and around the globe. The Bloomberg Business app and BloombergRadio.com. This is Bloomberg Surveillance.
From New York City, this is Bloomberg Surveillance for our audience worldwide. We're live on Bloomberg Radio. Equity futures advanced 12 points this Thursday morning. We're up 0.4% and set seemingly perhaps for a fourth straight day of gains in and around all-time highs. Let's get you some economic data. A wow number coming from initial jobless claims in the United States of America. With that number is Vinny Dajudais.
Yes, Jonathan. Jobless claims the lowest since April. Once again, testing a half-century low, 202,000 last week. The prior week, 217,000. So claims 202,000, underscoring the very low unemployment we're seeing in the U.S. Also the lowest in about a half century. Tomorrow, the government issues the monthly employment report. Right now, economists surveyed by Bloomberg looking for a January gain of about 160,000, respectable, but below last year's monthly average. Some of that, of course, may be labor shortages, trouble finding workers, although manufacturing's in recession. One other Labor Department report to tell you about: productivity fourth quarter, it bounced back. In 2019, it averaged 1.7%, the best since 2010. That fourth quarter number, 1.4%. Jobless claims down, productivity up. I'm Vinny Dajudais. Let's go back to New York.
Vinny, thanks so much. Bond market flat here. Yields were a little bit a lower yield, and they've come back flat right now. Futures up 14 as well. That 202,000 single statistic is jaw-dropping. We have the right guest to give perspective on this. Diane Swank out of Michigan Academics with Grant Thornton joins us right now, their chief economist. Diane, I'm going to cut to the chase, which is somebody in from Mars would look at that statistic. They'd look at the 4-week moving average, which grown-ups like you look at. They would look at claims to employed. They would look at claims to population, and they would say the biggest headache would be wage growth. Just on a macro basis, where's the wage growth given a single statistic like this incredible claims number?
There's certainly the biggest question out there, the $1 million question, or now we use billions and $1 trillion questions. I think it's very important that we've seen, wages at the bottom end of the food spectrum and the bottom end of the wage spectrum to accelerate quite substantially in recent years. But at the same time that's been happening, we've not seen it move up the food chain. Supervisors and managers have seen a deceleration in wages. In fact, the largest deceleration in wages we saw last year was in information sector, which includes Silicon Valley, and that less than halved over the course of the year. Really incredible slowdown in wage gains in some of these high-flying jobs. So there has been a very mixed picture on the wage picture, and that's why the Fed has been so humble and said, maybe there's a lot more room to run, and, we might have to cut rates again if we have to allow this economy to get a little heat.
John, we don't need an anecdote with a valuable time with Diane Swak, but I'm talking to kids. And they're going, they're 20-something or young 30s, and they're going, I'm making less inflation adjusted than I did X number of years ago, even with these minuscule wage gains.
Raises the question, why doesn't the Fed let this run hot? And Diane, back in 2016, Fed Chair Janet Yellen thought about it, then in 2017 turned around and said, it's not a good idea, and then they started hiking interest rates. And I'm just wondering, do we have a Chair Powell Fed, Dan, that is willing to let this one run and see what happens?
Oh, yeah. I think the Fed has discovered two things. One is it was wrong, and it's, eating humble pie on the fact that the economy can run a lot lower unemployment and encourage more wage gains than we thought possible at one point in time. And the other issue is that the Federal Reserve has realized that it's better at sustaining the expansion. It has more tools to do that than it does to actually right the ship if it capsizes. So it's better to keep this marathon of an expansion going and give it a little adrenaline shot than risk having it trip and go down. And that's one of the things that I think you're seeing playing out right now as well.
And Diane, one thing that's been making people somewhat paranoid about the gains that we've seen in terms of wage increases has been the lack of capital expenditures by businesses. And I'm wondering how long we can continue to see this divergence where the consumer remains incredibly strong, remains very confident that they can keep buying stuff and get jobs, and companies being very unconfident, both when it comes to putting money into their business as well as making longer-term plans.
Well, this is a real issue. Something's got to give, right? Either we see uncertainty, which, on the trade front has abated quite a bit. Even China has moved back on tariffs. Of course, a pandemic is one of the factors. They need a lot of things in China right now, and they're going to have shortages of food, and they need to have that at a cheaper price. But backing off on tariffs is very important. So that sort of the pause, the truce in the trade war with China should help a little bit. What we really need to do is see some firm footing. And so far, it looks like in the first quarter, we're going to see yet another quarter of decline in business investment, which we saw in the fourth quarter as well. That'd be a full year of declines in business investment. And at some point you wonder, when is it just cutting capital expenditures, and does it shift over to cutting heads, or do they get more certain and pick up both hiring and capital expenditures?
Diane, your charm is you're riveted to the Midwest and to the interstate businesses moving down from Chicago and across this great nation. What are you anecdotally seeing right now?
Well, we feel the manufacturing sector recession, and although it looks like it's bottoming, which is terrific news, one of the things we're worried about is the secondary impacts, particularly on middle market manufacturers, of the pandemic in China, the coronavirus in China, because that could, if it goes on past the next couple of weeks, really disrupt some production here in the Midwest. But then would be felt in the broader auto industry as well. So that's what we're watching very closely right now, and that's what our clients are very concerned about.
Can you take that right into a GDP statistic? I mean, Jeff Curry at Goldman Sachs has got a short-term 4.0% on China. Maybe it bounces back. Yeah. John Farrell calling that, the economist John Farrell calling that a V-shaped recovery. But Diane, can you model that in on 0.1% into U.S. GDP?
We can, and then we have to say, what are the uncertainty bounds on that? We're looking at about 0.2 off the first quarter, but yet there's offsetting effects. The fact that inventories get drawn down when that stuff doesn't come in, that suppresses GDP. On the flip side of it, of course, we have lower imports and slower import growth, which also boosts GDP. So in the U.S., when we get to these issues, it actually has offsetting effects, so you don't get as big an impact initially. What really the issue is for China is what is its effect on global growth, and how How is that going to affect multinational firms, and how long will this go on? Asia gets hit the hardest. The Western economies get hit secondarily. If we get that nice V-shaped comeback, the one thing going for China, as hard as this is that they've got a lot of excess capacity, and they have an ability to ramp up on production very rapidly once people return to work. The question is, when do they return?
Diane, there's a lot of concerns over consumption. Has it been destroyed? Has it been delayed? Concerns over output as well. Concerns over supply chains. And supply chains, I think, is where we should focus right now. I just wondered to what degree the supply chains that the United States and US companies rely on have been stress tested in the last year because of the trade war. And maybe they're better set up to handle what could be coming out of China at the moment.
Well, there certainly is when we talk about things like aluminum and steel tariffs. One of the things we've seen out there is that there's an excess global supply now of aluminum and steel, and you can pretty much go some other places to get these things, and that's really helped. It's much easier for large global companies to do that. The middle market firms, although they've been struggling much more with the tariffs and the weak global economic situation, and they can't switch suppliers as easily because they may have one key supplier in one region or one part of China that makes something for them. And Wuhan is a very big, heavy manufacturing area, so it's still harder for those smaller middle market firms to do that. They can't flip to Vietnam, say, like some of the large companies like Nike has done in building whole plants in Vietnam. It's not as easy for them, but you're right, there has been a lot more stress testing because of the terrorist situation. It's just been a compression of margins that I think is really important.
But Diane, to John's point, there's a question of how much these are stress tested, and then there's a question of how much this accelerates a shift away from China longer term in terms of a supply chain diversification, and we've seen that already happening with respect to Vietnam. But does this sort of push sort of a faster shift regardless of the trade policies that are being negotiated?
I think it does, and I think one of the things that we're seeing out there, I mean, first of all, Mexico is the winner out of this for North American trade, and that was already the winner of the trade war with China, and they need that to be a winner because they were struggling in their economy. But I think what people don't realize is it doesn't mean coming back to the U.S. It's still more competitive, it's sort of whack-a-mole, we call it trade diversion, as it goes somewhere else in the world, but it doesn't necessarily come back to the U.S., and that's the hard part is that there's no easy fix to righting the ship in terms of trying to make this all of a sudden a manufacturing hub that it once was. We can't turn back the dials of the clock back on time.
Diane Swark, thank you so much. Grant Thornton, greatly appreciate a view from Chicago this morning. We didn't have time to get the jobs report tomorrow, but we'll go beneath the headline data on the job economy tomorrow.
Can we just look at claims, though, Tom? I feel like we gloss over this.
Or ADP, come on, ADP as well.
It's such a high-frequency data point that sometimes we gloss over, and it's been at these levels for so long that I think we've become desensitized to it. 202.
Yeah, and I haven't even looked. I haven't had time to look.
And you mentioned population adjusted as well.
Yeah, I do that.
Incredible. Just incredible.
But there's a question of what kind of jobs these are. And I think that this is sort of, it gets to the heart of what Torsten Slok looks at. Are these higher paid jobs? Are they getting the fast wage gains? And if they're not, how long this is going to actually create, a sustained growth kind of backdrop?
Well, to your good point, and this is, as Diane mentioned, that we're seeing the wage growth in the lower decile, maybe the lower two deciles. I'm looking at the 4-week moving average of claims, and we have vectored down sharply over, 4, 5, 6 weeks. We're almost down to the lows of the late summer of last year. We're not down to the job positive tone of the spring of a year ago.
Does this indicate
we're there, essentially?
Well, does this indicate then that there's no slack left?
That's the raging question.
That's the question, right?
I'm talking to cash flow and the other. Their friends are
your
telling
leveraged line provider.
The friends are telling me, the kids' friends are telling me these people are nuts, and that it's a very difficult job economy. Where all the Uber drivers and the Lyft drivers come from? I don't say this flippantly. I mean, I just think it's like 2 or 3 worlds out there.
And the Fed got it wrong. Economy. And I think the Fed's coming around to the point of view that maybe it got it wrong too over the last couple of years as well. Let's get you some news worldwide, some headlines from Michael Barr. Good morning, Michael.
Good morning, John, Tom, Lisa. President Trump will speak today at the White House on his acquittal in his impeachment trial. President Trump is set to take a victory lap today, delivering remarks at the White House on what he called on Twitter, quote, our country's victory on the impeachment hoax. The president's lawyer, Jay Sekulow.
Elections have consequences. We all know that. And if you do not like the policies of a particular administration, or a particular candidate, you are free and welcome to vote for another candidate. But the answer is elections, not impeachment.
Mitt Romney was the lone Republican senator who voted to convict the president. The president will speak at noon Wall Street time, and Bloomberg will carry it live. The focus for Democrats has shifted to New Hampshire, where the next primary will be held on February 11th. At a New Hampshire town hall featuring some of the candidates, Tom Steyer says the Democratic nominee has to be someone capable of beating President Trump.
We're in a tough spot. This guy can get reelected. Take a look at what's gone on in the last 3 days and tell me he can't get reelected. Somebody's going to have to take him down who's not scared of him. Somebody's going to have to take him down who has the economic expertise, who's not an inside the beltway person, and that's me.
Meanwhile, with 97% of the results in the Iowa caucuses, Pete Buttigieg and Bernie Sanders are practically tied. China has taken a step toward ending the trade war with the U.S. Tariffs on $75 billion worth of soybeans, pork, and auto parts imported into China from the U.S. is getting cut in half. Global news 24 hours a day, on air and on Quick Take by Bloomberg, powered by more than 2,700 journalists and analysts in more than 120 countries. I'm Michael Barr. This is Bloomberg. Lisa, John, Tom.
Michael Barr, thank you, sir. That's the news. Let's get you some price action. Equities up by 0.4% on the S&P 500. Positive 12 points in the bond market. Muted price action. Yields higher by a single basis point to 166 on a 10-year. On a 2-year note, up by around about the same amount. Up by a basis point to 1.45%. To give you a feel of foreign exchange in G10, the dollar slightly stronger through the morning against the Japanese yen and a whole lot stronger against sterling. Cable with a move lower by 0.4%.
Yeah, there's no question about it. I mean, DXY 98.33. That's a big statistic. Futures up 12. Dow futures up 120. Stay with us worldwide. This is Bloomberg.
This is your Bloomberg Real Estate Report. I'm Denise Pellegrini. The coronavirus could have a big impact on the U.S. real estate market.
China has been the top foreign country who make purchases here in the U.S.
Lawrence Yun, chief economist at the National Association of Realtors.
In the long run, interestingly, we may actually see more Chinese buying property here in the U.S.
And Yun says, regardless of whether the coronavirus problem gets worse or gets better, more Chinese homebuyers will be eyeing the U.S.
The virus situation is reminding China that it is still a third world country, and I think some of the wealthy are tired of this status and wants to have the certainty of having property in a top countries like Australia, Canada, and the U.S.
Last year, Chinese buying in the U.S. shrunk as capital controls took hold and the trade war intensified. And that's your Bloomberg Real Estate Report. I'm Denise Pellegrini.
Message and data rates may apply. T&C and privacy terms can be found at babbel.com/terms. Please don't text and drive.
Have you wanted to speak a new language, but you thought it'd be too hard or take too much time? Then try Babbel for free by texting EXPLORE to 64,000. In just 15 minutes a day, you'll be on your way to speaking a new language in just a few weeks. And right now, you can try Babbel for free. Babbel starts out teaching you words and phrases by matching them with pictures. You won't believe how easy the interactive program is. Soon the sentences get a little bigger, and before you know it, you're having simulated conversations voiced by native speakers. And because Babbel is crafted by language experts and uses the spaced repetition method, in just 10 to 15 minutes a day, you'll be speaking the language of your choice with real confidence. With Babbel, you can speak a language. Just text EXPLORE to 64,000 and start your first lesson in the language of your choice for free. Download the Babbel app or text EXPLORE to 64,000 and try it for free. Text EXPLORE to 64,000.
Connecting decision makers to a network of new
keys. Check. Phone. Check. 70s playlist downloaded. Check. Nice. There's one more thing you should check before you leave. Your travel. There's a new cycleway under construction between Kensington Olympia and Brentford Town Centre, so expect delays due to lane closures at the junction of Kew Bridge Road and Chiswick High Road. Plan ahead at tfl.gov.uk. To the Mayor of London and TfL, every journey matters.
At Ring, we've reinvented the doorbell. So no matter where you are or what time of day, you can watch over your home and the things you care about. Ring Video Doorbell streams HD video and two-way talk straight to your phone, so you can speak to whoever's at your door from anywhere.
Delivery.
Oh, great. Could you leave it with my neighbour, please?
Sure, no problem.
And it's so simple you can install it yourself in minutes. See, hear and speak to whoever's at your door from wherever you are with Ring Video Doorbell. Available at ring.com and selected retailers.
Had the same job for the last 15 years? Working with the same people, in the same office, drinking tea from the same comedy mug, eating the same crayfish and rocket sandwich every lunchtime, using the same business jargon, and climbing the same greasy pole. What does that even mean? Then maybe it's time to switch it up, starting with the all-new Vauxhall Corsa. With its bold styling and up to 70 miles per gallon. To switch it up, visit your local Vauxhall dealership or search New Corsa. Official WLTP test figures for comparison purposes only. Real-world figures may vary.
Breaking news 24 hours a day at Bloomberg.com, the Bloomberg Business app, and on Quick Take by Bloomberg. This is a Bloomberg Business Flash.
And I'm Karen Moscow. Productivity in the U.S. rose less than forecast in the closing months of 2019, indicating the efficiency gains are settling back to their sluggish trend. Non-farm business employee output per hour increased at a 1.4% annualized rate in the fourth quarter. The number of Americans applying for unemployment benefits declined last week to the lowest level since mid-April, adding to evidence that the nation's jobs engine continues to motor ahead. The Federal Reserve Bank of New York's $30 billion operation to inject cash into the financing system for the next 2 weeks was oversubscribed today, the second such action in a row to attract bids in excess of the offering size. Futures are higher this morning. S&P futures up about 10 points. Dow futures up 94. NASDAQ futures up 28. The DAX in Germany's up 0.6%. 10-year Treasury little change, yield 1.65%. Yield on the 2-year 1.44%. And NYMEX crude oil is down 0.2% on 7 cents now at $50.68 a barrel. COMEX gold is up 1/3% at $5.60 at $15.6850 an ounce. The euro is at 1.10 against the dollar. British pound 1.2958 and the yen 109.87. And that's a Bloomberg Business Flash. Tom and Lisa.
Thanks so much, Karen. Greatly appreciate that. Again, a nice lift to the markets. We'll really dive into this in the next hour with Paul Sweeney. Right now, Lisa Bramo and Tom Keene, and joining us, Kevin Cirilli. Kevin, we got 8 ways to go, including New Hampshire, but we've got to start with the binders full of emotion that we saw in Capitol Hill yesterday from the senator from Utah. You speak to senior Republican officials and you speak to their staffs. How did they respond?
Well, in Romney world, it was met with curious eyes, to be frank with you. I can tell you that based upon conversations with several staffers in Romney's political orbit, they really truthfully didn't know where Senator Romney was going to land on this, Tom, up until yesterday. Ditto for the centrist Democrat from West Virginia, Senator Joe Manchin. And that's really the broader point that I would make here, is that for those two lawmakers in particular, they kept this incredibly close to vest. And for Manchin in particular, based upon my reporting with his political orbit, I mean, he really didn't let anyone know until he walked on to the Senate floor. Beyond that, Doug Jones is the other Democrat. Of course, he beat Roy Moore in Alabama. For him to vote to convict was also very noteworthy as well.
It's important that you mention that of the two Democrats, because Mr. Romney's certainly taking the focus. Let's go back 8 years to Mitt Romney, New Hampshire, after winning the caucuses by 8 votes out in Iowa, back when they counted them correctly as well. That was a remarkable New Hampshire primary 8 years ago. What's it going to be like now? What do you observe in Concord, in Manchester, and in Dixville Notch?
Well, first of all, it's a snowy day here in Manchester, New Hampshire, and they've changed the name of the hotel where everybody stays downtown at the Doubletree. So I walk in after I was in Boston with our colleagues up there when we flew in from Iowa. And I walk into the lobby, and who do I legitimately run into? Joe Biden. So he's already being spotted all across here, and he looked to be in good spirits. This, as of course, the results of the Iowa caucus and the debacle of the Iowa caucus results still getting a lot of attention in the political space. But some momentum, apparent momentum for former South Bend Mayor Pete Buttigieg. And of course, Bernie Sanders. I was just looking at the headline on the Bloomberg terminal, $25 million the Sanders campaign raked in the last filing quarter. So for Sanders, it's very notable to see how he does this. I have to say, I've done this, having done this extensively with Trump World last cycle, I have to say there are so many comparisons that and parallels that I'm noticing between Sanders and people saying that he can't win in the establishment, and very Cruz-esque, Ted Cruz-esque comments coming from some members of the Democratic establishment saying that he has to be stopped, with a Southern Wall or on Super Tuesday, and that's really echoing the conversations that were had last cycle with Donald Trump.
So let's put the politics aside just for 1 minute here. There is a larger question for the Democratic Party, which is, what is their message going to be when it comes to the economy? That is one of the main issues that President Trump can herald and say, the economy is growing, we're doing phenomenally, we have trade deals. What does the Democratic candidate say back?
Lisa, that's such an important question, and that's really the fight of the debate that's going to be had on Friday night here in New Hampshire, because Joe Biden taking off political gloves, so to speak, on the campaign trail yesterday and saying that if anyone is nominated but him, that they would be labeled a Democratic socialist. But this is where I really truthfully think that Sanders' campaign message, this is why it's resonating. He's talking about impeachment, but he's not really. He's talking about a political revolution. He's talking about ideas. And this, I would be, again, the parallel of last cycle. Hillary Clinton, what were her ideas last cycle as opposed to just running against another candidate, in that case, Donald Trump? Donald Trump, you might disagree with his ideas, you might agree with them, but his ideas were the wall. His ideas were to shake up Washington, and that's where he was able to capture the imagination of the electorate. Ditto for Bernie Sanders.
What are the ideas that are resonating with Democratic voters right now?
Medicare for all, breaking up big banks, climate change, and anywhere I go, income inequality, and I feel like a broken record, but when you're on the trail and you're talking to voters, like I did in Iowa, like I've done here in New Hampshire, there is those 70,000 voters who are independent, who vote for Democrats, who vote for Republicans, and they swing back and forth. And for many of them, it's a toss-up between for working class voters, it's a toss-up between Donald Trump and Bernie Sanders. That's a very real sentiment.
Kevin Cirilli, you sound great with 5 hours sleep, more than he's had here in days. Kevin Cirilli, our chief Washington correspondent, on the road from Iowa to New Hampshire. We're seeing images of the president. He's at a prayer breakfast and he's putting up newspapers, all the Washington newspapers, saying acquitted right now. And
declaring victory.
Sure, it's going to be with the speech. Rich, remind me, 12 noon on the president's speech today. 12 noon today. We'll have that for you on Bloomberg Radio and Television worldwide. Lisa, what do you see?
Well, to me, I think that the big question is, when it comes to economic growth, in the U.S., it looks pretty strong. I was looking this morning at the U.S. City Surprise Index, the Economic Surprise Index, which indicates how the data is coming in versus analysts' expectations. It's getting close to the highest level since May of 2018. So that means that even though people are pretty sanguine about the economy, you're still getting better data even.
And what's interesting about this, and this goes to domestic final sales, there can be all these international shocks, and you still want to see what the consumer's doing. I get a decidedly mixed picture out of economists. I mean, some are talking sub 2% GDP just framed right in, and you're not seeing that in claims or in a few of these other data points.
Well, clouding the data is a sort of bifurcation in workers, where you've got the lower end that are struggling, especially with fixed healthcare costs and rents, even though their debt loads aren't as high to their income relative to the past, their fixed costs are. And so this is creating a sort of distorted picture at that end versus the upper end, which is doing just fine.
Futures up 10. Dow futures up 90. The VIX indeterminate today, 0.05. Really a flat VIX, 15.20. Special thanks, Damian Sassower of our emerging markets team. Really strong this morning on some of these shocks out of China. Please stay with us worldwide. This is Bloomberg.
Hey, y'all, Jeff Fox.
Keys. Check. Phone. Check. 70s playlist downloaded? Check. Nice. There's one more thing you should check before you leave. Your travel. There's a new cycleway under construction between Kensington Olympia and Brentford Town Centre, so expect delays due to lane closures at the junction of Kew Bridge Road and Chiswick High Road. Plan ahead at tfl.gov.uk. To the Mayor of London and TfL, every journey matters.
Wouldn't it be nice to keep things you normally lose? Your favourite scarf, your train of thought, or your mobile data? Because with most other networks, you get to the end of the month and your data is, well, never to be seen again. But unlike anyone else, with Sky Mobile, you can roll and keep all your unused data for up to 3 years. Sky Mobile. Hello, possible.
Full terms and conditions at sky.com/mobile.
5 is in! What a run! Touchdown, Kansas City!
Congratulations to the Kansas City Chiefs on winning their first Super Bowl in 50 years and second in franchise history.
50, Watkins, 10, chase to the 5, into the end zone, touchdown! That may be all she wrote!
While the NFL's 100th season may be over, football never stops on TuneIn. Search NFL Podcast to stay current with all the off-season wheeling and dealing. And get ready for the 2020 NFL Draft in April.
Go courtside with the NBA on TuneIn. With the NBA on TuneIn, hear your favorite team and players take on their biggest rivals during the biggest games throughout the year, including regular season showdowns, the 2020 All-Star Game, and the NBA Finals in June, featuring the home and away calls for all 30 teams. Plus, with the NBA on demand, relive the best moments of the season by listening to the past games in their entirety. Listen to the NBA all season long on TuneIn.
Want to hear about the latest and greatest things to listen to on TuneIn? For reminders of the biggest live sports games, debates, and breaking news stories, follow @TuneIn on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram to stay connected with the audio that matters to you.
Right now, instead of hearing this, you could be listening to the music that keeps you moving with TuneIn Premium. Find today's biggest songs and all of your favorites commercial-free. Visit TuneIn.com/premium to upgrade.
Hey, NFL fan, can't watch the game? Can't be there? No biggie. With your TuneIn Premium membership, you already have an all-access pass to every team and every game in the league. Amazing, right?
Steps up, floats it towards at the goal line. It's intercepted.
Listen live as the action unfolds, or on demand when you can. Anytime, anywhere, all season long.
Right side, it is caught. It is in for the right side for the touchdown.
Search NFL today.
The puck drops. 12 players face off to win. The suspense is pure torture, but you wouldn't miss this for the world. TuneIn brings you every minute of the NHL season. Listen live to hockey when it matters most on TuneIn.
You love TuneIn for live breaking news from CNN, MSNBC, Fox, CNBC, and more. But when you can't catch your favorite show as it airs, it might just be a click away as a podcast. Search your favorite news station to explore all the on-demand news shows on TuneIn.
The first time.
We always talk about the losers in a trade war.
You benefit if you're just further away from China.
So that you can too.
What are the ramifications if she crumbles or doesn't crumble?
Bloomberg Radio, the Bloomberg Business, Radio.com, and iHeartRadio apps, and BloombergRadio.com. Bloomberg, the world is listening. From the financial capital of the world, 24 hours a day at Bloomberg.com, on the Bloomberg Business app, and on Quick Take by Bloomberg. This is Bloomberg Radio. This is Bloomberg Surveillance Economics.
The Federal Reserve's independence is crucial.
Central banks should be prepared and not presumptuous.
Finance.
In order to grow, you need to innovate.
Global money doesn't like uncertainty.
Investment.
I think the issue in the market is really more about the possibility of a recession in the next couple of years.
I do think we need to get back to where we have always been, the American dream.
Bloomberg Surveillance with Tom Keene and Paul Sweeney on Bloomberg Radio.
Oh, great, Paul. Good morning, everyone. 706 on Tesla. The 600 handle was a joy to see earlier this morning. Those 10 shares, Paul, I bought yesterday at, what was it, 890, 860. What? I don't have the confirmation yet from the broker.
You're a long-term investor. Don't worry about it.
I am now. Yes. Anyways, well, that's one of the things we'll talk about here today, Tesla. And I know David Wilson's got lined up important equity comments as well. Paul, you walk in and you see futures. I mean, if you said to me there'd be a major worldwide virus There'd be the challenges of Europe that are real, etc. Acquittal of a president, all the emotion in Washington. I walk in, SPX and Dow futures at the time were at record high.
Yeah, absolutely, Tom. And I think it's just coming back to what has been driving this market, which is the liquidity, the global liquidity from central bankers driving risk assets higher. And yes, the coronavirus is an issue on many levels, but it just doesn't seem to be enough to dent the momentum in this market.
Bang up economic report this morning on claims. A low statistic is a better, more fully employed America, and that gets us out to our job report tomorrow. We'll go beneath the headline data tomorrow at 8:30. Right now, as he is wont to do, David Wilson drags himself off Twitter to talk about Twitter. David.
Yeah, you do what you got to do, Tom.
The one true Dave.
Well, no, just the one Dave. That's my Twitter handle.
Excuse me.
It's okay. It's all good. Because Twitter's the most active stock in early trading, and it's up 8.5%. These social media companies' revenue unexpectedly rose above $1 billion for the first time in the fourth quarter, and the number of daily active users beat analysts' average estimate in the Bloomberg survey. And since you've already mentioned Tesla, we should note it's down 4%. The electric car maker lower for a second day after more than doubling to begin the year. Now, Tesla fell yesterday by 17%. That was the second biggest loss since the company went public in 2010. Qualcomm lower by
no comment. I'm dying.
Yeah, I understand.
It's a tax event in December.
December's a long way away, and I'll tell you, Qualcomm's down 1.5%. The maker of mobile phone chips said a payoff from the shift to 5G wireless networks will take more time than analysts predicted. The forecast outweighed fiscal first quarter earnings and sales that topped estimates. Some gains among drug makers. Bristol Myers Squibb up 3%. Their fourth quarter earnings and sales far surpassed estimates. Now, Bloomberg Intelligence pointed out that the gaps reflected differing assumptions on the company's takeover of Celgene that was completed in November. Gilead Sciences up 2%. China's state-run news service Xinhua reported that researchers would start testing one of the company's drugs today as a treatment for coronavirus. Now, you may recall Gilead fell yesterday after those same researchers applied for a Chinese patent on that particular use of the drug. That said, Biogen up 2.5%. The drug maker higher for a second day after fending off the U.S. patent challenge to the multiple sclerosis medicine Tecfidera, its biggest seller. Biogen rose yesterday by 17.5% after Mylan's challenge was rejected. As far as earnings go, you got a whole bunch of stocks moving higher. The health insurer Cigna up 2.5% in early trading. The drug distributor Cardinal Health up 6.5%. The cosmetics maker Estee Lauder up 5.5%. And Philip Morris International, we should note, the cigarette maker higher by 1.5%. On the other hand, you have the drug maker Becton Dickinson down 9%. Food maker Kellogg off by 6.5%. The meat processor Tyson Foods down 3.5%. And the communication software maker Twilio lower by 4%.
I love this time of year for David. I mean, we all get in a frenzy about the big banks, big banks. But this is such an eclectic read. It's like reading the back. It's like reading the back page of the Wall Street Journal 20 years ago.
Yeah, absolutely. What's
that was
going
how,
on?
you know, before the Bloomberg. That's how you got your earnings.
Yep.
You turned over the Wall Street Journal, and David, all there was revenues, net income, and I think they had share count. No talk, no nothing, and you had to sit there with a pencil and try and figure it out.
Absolutely.
Anaconda Copper. What else do you have?
We have a few more things to talk about, actually. There's a company called Forescout Technologies that's up 20%. The security software maker accepted a $1.9 billion takeover offer by the private equity firm Advent International. And we have a couple of initial public offerings coming up. PPD is one of them. The biotechnology and drug researcher made this year's biggest U.S. IPO. PPD raising $1.62 billion by selling shares at the top of a planned price range. They went for $27 each. And then there's Casper Sleep.
Did that make it to the public markets?
It did.
Okay.
Or it will. You're talking about a $100 million IPO for the bed-in-a-box seller. That one priced at $12 a share, the low end of a reduced price range.
And below the private market value, another IPO coming below what the private markets were valuing it at.
Yeah, absolutely. Yep. And it's another company that's not making money yet, and people are wondering about that path to profitability.
There you go.
Very good. This is important, folks. We have Chairman Levitt on from time to time, and of course he's on today to talk about the Mets. He's rumored to pick up the pieces from Mr. Cohen and see what he can do with the Mets. Arthur Levitt, a former chairman of the Securities Exchange Commission and board member for Bloomberg LP. And he wrote an essay the other day, and I would suggest, Paul Sweeney, that it harkens back to the importance of his number game speech of 1998. Arthur's too modest to talk about it, but he changed single-handedly in the late 90s the dialogue of Wall Street on the individual investor. It was, I remember this as clear as a bell, it was an extremely lonely voice speaking out against large institutions, which of course he was part of. And he does the same thing today with mutual funds are still keeping secrets. Paul Sweeney, I read every word of it.
Absolutely. In the New York Times op-ed just from a couple of days ago, Arthur Levitt, talk to us about what you're seeing in terms of the regulatory environment, the regulatory framework, as equity markets hit new highs seemingly every day.
Yes, and in spite of that, fund companies want the commission to reduce the requirement for a single once-a-year postcard alerting investors where they can search for the information on the internet. So it's almost as if the industry, mutual fund industry, doesn't want investors to look at the risks and costs of staying with a fund. When the commission gave companies the ability to require investors to vote their proxies on the internet in 2007, the percentage of investors voting fell significantly. And I guess what's worse about this push to reduce disclosure is that the commission has already made life easier for mutual funds. 2 years ago, the commission agreed to allow fund companies to shift to the forced March model for disclosure. Under that rule, they can do as little as send 3 notices a year, once on where to find a prospectus and twice to see recent performance and costs. The industry wants to knock even that low standard to just 1 notice.
So, Arthur, this is kind of, if you have a theme of your commentary over the last 12 months, say, on this particular program, it's been the SEC taking more of a hands-off approach as it relates to regulation. Are you concerned that perhaps we've gone too far in that regard?
I do. I think that history does repeat itself. We're in a total deregulatory environment. Rules and regulations are diminishing rather than accelerating. And of course, there's a certain amount of overkill in a period such as this. In the same way, when we burden companies with too much regulation, we go through a period that is very similar to what we're experiencing now. Deregulate no matter what the cost. And my op-ed piece talks about that cost and its dangers.
Now, the cost is there's no profit in asset management anymore. Are we at a tip point, Arthur, where active managers can't make the gross revenue to pay for appropriate accounting disclosure?
Well, if we're not at that point, we should be at that point.
You sound like the late John Bogle. Be careful, Arthur. You sound like you're in Vanguard here.
Well, I'm a great believer in Vanguard and was a great friend of Vogel.
I know you were. Let me change the script then. Vanguard's going to go out and do private equity or something,
that's
Paul.
Right. Yep.
And they're going to, they're buried in the headline. It was going to be to institutions, et cetera, but someday to wealthy individuals. Arthur, can you envision private equity, the world of, say, David Rubenstein going out to retail?
No, I can't. I think they'll try, but I think there are a lot of problems with it. Yeah. The private equity formula is very different than most retail investors could deal with and endure.
Arthur, I got to go back 48 years, and unfortunately this isn't the New York Mets or even the dreaded New York Yankees. I'm going to go back to George Romney running housing for the United States of America. He was in the cabinet at the time. Of course, the gentleman from Michigan, the former governor. And they did a housing thing with the very nascent Secretary of Housing and Urban Development. I think they were barely getting it started, and they had to pitch bonds. And so they went to a guy named Arthur Levitt in New York, who was a controller at the time, to get the bonds done. I mean, the Romney name goes back, and it's linked right with your father and with Levitt years ago as well. What did you see from Mitt Romney yesterday? With the historical prism of Arthur Levitt, how did you perceive that moment?
Well, the moment when he divulged his vote to impeach Trump, I thought was a fairly heroic moment. There were plenty of senators who could have said the same thing, but didn't wish to incur the wrath of Trump. I thought Romney demonstrated the kind of independence his name has always been associated with.
Arthur Levitt, the younger, with us this morning, of course, the former chairman of the SEC. So, Arthur, thank you so much. And again, the essay, mutual funds are still keeping secrets, that in the New York Times. With our news in New York City, here's Michael Barr.
Tom, Paul, thank you very much. President Trump will speak today at the White House on his acquittal in his impeachment trial. President Trump is set to take a victory lap today, delivering remarks on what he called on Twitter, quote, our country's victory on the impeachment hoax. President's lawyer, Jay Sekulow.
Elections have consequences. We all know that. And if you do not like the policies of a particular administration or a particular candidate, you are free and welcome to vote for another candidate. But the answer is elections, not impeachment.
Mitt Romney was the lone Republican senator who voted to convict the president. The president will speak at noon Wall Street time, and Bloomberg will carry it live. The focus for Democrats has shifted to New Hampshire, where the next primary will be held on February 11th. At a New Hampshire town hall featuring some of the candidates, Tom Steyer says the Democratic nominee has to be someone capable of beating President Trump.
We're in a tough spot. This guy can get reelected. Take a look at what's gone on in the last 3 days and tell me he can't get reelected. Somebody's going to have to take him down who's not scared of him. Somebody's going to have to take him down who has the economic expertise, who's not an inside the beltway person, and that's me.
And actor Kirk Douglas has died at age 103. Global news, 24 hours a day, on air and on Quick Take by Bloomberg, powered by more than 2,700 journalists and analysts in more than 120 countries. I'm Michael Barr. This is Bloomberg. Tom, Paul?
Michael Barr, thank you so much. We have green on the screen yet again for the equity markets. S&P up 10, the Dow up 102. That's 29,344 on the Dow Jones Industrial. NASDAQ up 26. Looking at rates, 10-year Treasury down just 3/30 seconds, kicking that yield up just slightly to 1.66%. Looking at crude, stable today. WTI, $50.72 a barrel. This is Bloomberg.
25 years ago, NJIT graduate Dick Sweeney co-founded Keurig Green Mountain, a company whose incredible innovations changed the way the world brews a cup of coffee. Today, he lectures widely on business leadership and is a strong advocate for NJIT's work to combine business education with the power of STEM.
NJIT is definitely fostering the innovative thinking for budding entrepreneurs simply because that's the world we live in. NJIT is producing students that have been trained, educated, and given the business acumen to be a contributor to a company. The distinct mission is to develop great STEM scholars. The attributes I've always looked for in team members are heart, smarts, guts, and luck. So we want people with passion, intelligence, courage, and never discount luck. The student coming out of NJIT has experienced all of that.
NJIT, New Jersey Institute of Technology. Learn more at njit.edu.
Asset managers who seize change to launch new strategies, add distribution channels, or exploit new technology to re-engineer the investor experience are often rewarded. However, in an industry paralyzed with complexity, few act with agility or decisively. Few run their businesses strategically. Yet the most competitive managers in the market know with the right partner and a flexible operating system, you can. Go boldly toward change with SEI Investment Manager Services.
Determination and operational strength are both essential factors for growth in asset management. I'm
Steve Meyer, President and Head of SEI's Investment Manager Services Division. We know that disruptive forces create opportunities around the world. If you see potential in change, our industry specialists will maximize SEI's integrated platform of data and risk management, global investment operations, compliance support, and investor services to position your asset management business for success. Come grow with us.
With SEI Investment Manager Services, you lead the charge in a competitive marketplace. Learn more at SEIC.com/C's change.
Influential
For up to 50% off selected floors and beds, and up to an additional £250 off your total flooring order. Carpet Right for life. Terms and conditions apply.
Whatever job you're searching for, you can find it on LinkedIn. First jobs, flexible jobs, keep me out the cold jobs, advertising jobs, accounting jobs, HR, PR, even ER jobs, East London jobs, West London jobs, extra hour in bed jobs, startup jobs, late start jobs, get home in the daylight jobs, banking jobs, building jobs, flexible working on a Friday jobs, or even voiceover jobs, which is how I ended up recording this ad. Search millions of jobs on LinkedIn and find one meant for you.
Keys. Check. Phone. Check. 70s playlist downloaded? Check. Nice. There's one more thing you should check before you leave. Your travel. There's a new cycleway under construction between Kensington Olympia and Brentford Town Centre, so expect delays due to lane closures at the junction of Kew Bridge Road and Chiswick High Road. Plan ahead at tfl.gov.uk. To the Mayor of London and TfL, every journey matters.
Welcome to Cathay Island. We hope you've enjoyed flying Cathay Airways. Oh, and Cathay, congratulations on the Euro Millions win.
This Friday's Euro Millions is a massive £105 million super jackpot. That's dream come true money. Euro Millions from the National Lottery. Your numbers make amazing happen. Estimated jackpot. Rules and procedures apply. Players must be 16 or over.
News 24 hours a day at Bloomberg.com, the Bloomberg Business app, and on Quick Take by Bloomberg. This is a Bloomberg Business Flash.
And I'm Karen Moscow, and U.S. stock index futures are rising this morning as China's plans for tariff cuts on U.S. imports added to optimism the global economy will weather the hit from the coronavirus. We check the markets every 15 minutes throughout the trading day on Bloomberg. S&P futures up 10 points, Dow futures up 105, NASDAQ futures up 24. The DAX in Germany is up 0.7%. The 10-year Treasury down 430 seconds, yield 1.66%. The yield on the 2-year 1.45%. NYMEX crude oil is down 0.3% or 15 cents at $50.60 a barrel. COMEX gold is up 0.2% or $3.30 at $15.6620 an ounce. The euro 1.0998 against the dollar. British pound 1.2967, and the yen is at 109.90. And watching shares of Twitter up 9%. It topped analyst projections for fourth quarter revenue and added more new daily users than expected. And that's a Bloomberg Business Flash. Tom and Paul.
Karen, thank you so much. Again, futures up 10, Dow futures up 94. Mike Wilson is with Morgan Stanley. He has not said go to cash, but he has decidedly been cautious on this great bull market. He joins us now. Mike, I want to go to one of your individual stock selections, but far more than that, I want to go to one single sentence in your recent note, which is up, but beneath the data, there's been some real damage to the markets. What do you mean by that?
Well, what we've been saying for quite a while is that, it's definitely a bull market. Last year, I think back in October, when it became clear that the central banks were going to go to the next level and inject money into their balance sheet, you call it QE, now QE, whatever it is, the liquidity bull market took over again. And so we're on board with that. And we raised our price targets last fall, and we've talked about a 3,500 price target for the first half of this year. But the fundamentals have really not supported that move. It doesn't mean that that we're going to roll over into recession. In fact, our economists are quite constructive on the global backdrop, more than the U.S., but the global backdrop looks quite good. We have this virus which is threatening that. They think it will end up being fine and we'll end up weathering it, like I think most people are saying at this point. And so what we have is we have a liquidity-driven bull market, and underneath the surface, Tom, the market has traded very defensively. What do I mean by that? Large caps have handily beaten small. High-quality stocks have continued to beat low-quality stocks, and the one area we've been focused on is defensively oriented stocks have really